What's up everyone, I'm Em, and today I kind of want to solve FNAF. Obviously, I can't put everything in one video or I'd go insane, and there's so many details I haven't captured. But I wanted to make a Google Doc with a theory because I figured that'd be easier than a video, and got sidetracked by my own theory and ended up figuring out a bunch of other things that I didn't think I would find out. I will link the doc below for the readers out there, but it will be about the same as this video. I'm going to keep this as brief as possible. FNAF is built on theory Jenga, which means that to make any point, I have to prove like 15 others. I know you're all probably used to bullshit, so I will try my best to cut to the chase. Most of my information comes from the regular FNAF wiki, and I got a lot of examples for points and counterpoints from the theory wiki. If I'm saying that there are some people that believe something, I'm trying not to strawman. I'm taking points directly from the theory wiki. But I did avoid a lot of the more fringe beliefs because I feel like if I were to talk about every counterpoint in existence, it would take too long. A lot of videos have already put these ideas into existence in isolation rather than all compiled together. I will probably link down below a video or two that I might have gotten inspiration from. The point of this video was to find an overarching narrative for the first few games, those being FNAF 1 through 6, FNAF World, and Ultimate Custom Night. That being said, I will use evidence other than this is the most narratively satisfying, although I will use that here and there because I do think that's important. This theory is technically about the cycle of violence and abuse. FNAF does revolve around child murder, but there are a few additional things I want to provide content warnings for. I'll be talking, but not going into detail, about the following topics: abuse, neglect, suicide, codependency between a victim and abuser, dehumanization, and infantilization as a tool for dehumanization. We're here to talk about a lot of things, but all of this revolves around MikeTOYSNHK, or MikeTOYSNHK, as people have gotten me to start calling it. Sometimes your fandom reaches the level of insanity that requires you to make theory abbreviations. Mike being in reference to Mike Afton, we'll get to him later, I promise, and TOYSNHK being in reference to the one you should not have killed. Part 1. TOYSNHK and Ultimate Custom Night. Ultimate Custom Night, or UCN, is exactly what the name implies, a game in which the player can customize their night. A good portion of the animatronics have snappy little lines when they kill you, many of which imply that this is some form of retribution for something.
I am a burning reminder of your misdeeds.
I am your wickedness, made of flesh.
I recognize you, but I'm not afraid of you. Not anymore.
What is this new person? Is it me trapped, or is it you? Perhaps it's us both.
Furthermore, there are various instances in which animatronics mention an individual the player shouldn't have killed, commonly referred to as the one you should not have killed, TOYSNHK, or the vengeful spirit. There are people that believe the vengeful spirit and TOYSNHK are two different people. However, I'll go through the amount of spirits that are in UCN in a later section. Here are some examples of the lines.
He's here and always watching, the one you shouldn't have killed.
I am remade, but not by you, by the one you should not have killed.
I have seen him, the one you shouldn't have killed.
TOYSNHK seems to use he/him pronouns, but this is a point of contention within the fandom, so personally I will be using they/them until I get to a point later in this video. The vengeful spirit has a few lines of their own, spoken through the mediocre melodies, a series of animatronics you can buy in the 6th game, Pizzeria Simulator. They mostly serve as set dressing and cannot attack you. We've recently learned that they've been around since the 1970s, created by a company that served as a contractor for Freddy's for a while. Most of the mediocre melodies have a line in which they address the player directly as the vengeful spirit. You can hear a second voice underlaid their own that is softer and more childlike. I will play the lines for you now.
We've only just begun. I will never let you leave. I will never let you rest.
He tried to release you. He tried to release us. But I'm not gonna let that happen. I will hold you here. I will keep you here. No matter how many times they burn us.
This is how it feels. And you get to experience it over and over and over again. Forever. I will never let you leave.
This, of course, leads us to a simple narrative. A spirit is torturing someone who killed them, the player. The player is typically considered to be William Afton, although some believe it's Mike Afton. Logically, I think it's William, considering he's the killer of the series. In Fazbear Frights, a short story anthology, William is kept in a comatose state by one of his victims, forced to live ambiguous nightmares. This story is called The Man in Room 1280 and will be important later. Several of the animatronics also seem to reference things William has said.
Let me put you back together, then take you apart all over again.
I put her back together, just like you asked me to.
This is Mike speaking, but it does seem like he is directly quoting William. Nightmare Freddy even explains that he was remade, but not by you, indicating the player potentially made him at some point in time. There are only a couple of points against this theory that I've seen, according to the Theory Wiki, which, like I said, was much easier to surf through than all of YouTube. The first is that William has not seen all the animatronics or heard all the audio that's in this game. This will come up later, but for now we're just going to set that point aside. The second point is that Scraptrap and Springtrap, both of whom are just William Afton in an animatronic suit, appear in UCN. That being said, the spirit is implied to have recreated these animatronics, as previously referenced by Nightmare Freddy. That and this game is about reflection. We'll dip into that later. So we have a tentative identity of the player, but I've never been satisfied with the tentative TOYSNHK identities I see most often in this fandom, many of whom we'll actually cover in this video. Throughout this video, we're going to go through different elements of the vengeful spirit and what they do. In the meantime, here's a face that can appear in Ultimate Custom Night. Whether or not this reflects TOYSNHK's appearance is unknown. Many believe the vengeful spirit has blonde hair and blue eyes, not unlike the yellow hair and gray eyes in this image. That being said, this is just a filtered image of the creator's son, so using this as a reference to the spirit's appearance should be taken with a grain of salt. But to confirm the spirit's identity, we must clear up a few things. Part 2. How many spirits? There is some discourse as to whether TOYSNHK is torturing William alone, or if the vengeful spirit is torturing William on behalf of a separate person he should not have killed, or if TOYSNHK is holding all of William's victims hostage to torture him together. Unfortunately, my answer isn't super open and shut, but I will try to answer it to the best of my ability. Very little is confirmed in FNAF, but I can say that many of the animatronics in UCN are never implied to be possessed. These include the Mediocre Melodies, Trash and the Gang, the Rockstar line, Balloon Boy, and JJ, many of which who never exhibit violent or even irregular behavior prior to this game. As far as we know, they only perform their intended functions. Furthermore, few animatronics actually reference the spirits that possess them, other than TOYSNHK. They all speak vaguely enough that it's not clear as to whether or not this is TOYSNHK's work or if this is the spirit that is possessing them.
These are strange circumstances that have brought us together.
This provides no indication as to whether TOYSNHK is regarding their relationship with William if they are speaking through Ballora to reference her and William reuniting, or if this is a separate spirit possessing Ballora and speaking to William.
So good to see you again, my truest friend.
I doubt this is an explicit reference to Rockstar Bonnie being possessed by someone. The only person we've heard referred to as William's friend is Henry Emily, and Henry is alive during the game Rockstar Bonnie primarily features in, that being FNAF 6 or Pizzeria Simulator.
What is this new person? Is it me trapped, or is it you? Perhaps it's us both.
Personally, I think this is likely TOYSNHK speaking and not Jeremy, the spirit who possesses Bonnie. UCN is, in its own way, a self-imposed prison sentence. TOYSNHK is holding William with them instead of moving on. The specific wording of us both implies that there are two individuals trapped rather than a collection of them. That being said, with every rule comes exceptions. Thankfully only two, one of which that is harder to explain than the other, but also infinitely more succinct, so we'll start with that one.
I was the first. I have seen everything.
Presumably, this is in reference to Susie, the alleged first victim of the Missing Children's Incident, or MCI, killed and stuffed into Chica. That being said, this is the only indication that other spirits are present at all, save for another example I'll get to right after this. Which brings me to a few potential explanations. The first is that TOYSNHK is just emulating Susie. The second is that this is referencing Chica's role as the first, being the first animatronic to have a child stuffed inside who ended up possessing the suit. This is furthered by the fact that Chica doesn't actually clarify what she was the first of. The final is that Susie is visiting, although I do find that unlikely. I think it's fun, though. I do think a spirit is visiting, the only other spirit here alongside William and TOYSNHK. Charlotte, Charlie, Emily, although her stay might have been brief. Charlie seems to move on last in the Happiest Day minigame, if only shortly after the others. She's consistently painted as the protector of her fellow spirits, being the one to give them life and even referring to herself as such. Speaking of which, let's look into Charlie's lines, or the puppet's lines, the animatronic she possesses.
The others are under my protection.
A fairly simple reason for Charlie to be here, even if the other spirits aren't. TOYSNHK, after all, is one of William's victims, and therefore under Charlie's protection as well.
I don't hate you, but you need to stay out of my way.
Charlie is an antagonist in the second game. She seems to side with the player in the third game, presumably because she realizes who her killer is. She is an antagonist again in the sixth game, but she is also actively being shocked at that point, so I don't think she's really in her right mind. Presumably, this change of sides is because she realizes who her real killer is. Charlie not hating William doesn't make sense. He killed her, and she seems antagonistic to him throughout the games. Additionally, telling a guy trapped in Purgatory to stay out of your way doesn't make much sense. He's literally being kept out of the way. However, if we're working with the assumption that TOYSNHK, one of William's victims, is under Charlie's protection, Charlie could easily be speaking to TOYSNHK. She could be saying that despite what they're doing and everything they might have done in the past, she doesn't hate them, but she doesn't want them to get in the way of her mission to help everyone move on. Some further proof that Charlie isn't speaking to William are her other lines.
Seeing you powerless is like music to me. The others are like animals, but I am very aware. I recognize you, but I'm not afraid of you. Not anymore.
Charlie is just as aggressive as the other animatronics, which is exactly why she is presumably speaking to two different people. I have seen some people assume that TOYSNHK is speaking through the puppet for all but one of these lines, but there is no change in the puppet's voice. The puppet's voice seems to be Charlie's, since it sounds more human than most of the animatronics. Additionally, this relies on the belief that Charlie isn't violent towards William, and often that "I don't hate you" is in reference to him. But, as I've said before, even if Charlie didn't hate him, it wouldn't make sense for her to ask somebody trapped in Purgatory to stay out of her way. Which is to say, Charlie is here. But while she gets in a hit or two on William, she seems to disapprove of this plan, ordering the spirit to stop interfering, presumably with her plans to help the other spirits move on. This rules out Charlie as the vengeful spirit and establishes that Charlie would have enough of a reason to hate TOYSNHK, at least to the extent that she would have to clarify that she didn't. But if there aren't any other spirits in UCN other than TOYSNHK, William, and occasionally Charlie, she has no reason to hate them. The only person they're hurting is themselves and their killer, unless the spirit did something else to harm someone under Charlie's protection. For now, I think I can safely establish that there are two spirits in UCN, William and TOYSNHK, or the vengeful spirit, with the small caveat that Charlie seems to be able to enter and interact with this purgatory despite not actively being involved. We have also ruled out Charlie TOYSNHK, or the theory that Charlie is the one you should not have killed. Part 3. The Pronoun Problem. This is kind of just what makes the most sense for me to title this section. I understand it looks bad, I'm sorry. We are just going to establish what pronouns TOYSNHK uses because it helps narrow down at least some of our options, and it is a small point of contention within the fandom. In some of the quotes that I've played before but will play again, you can see that TOYSNHK is referred to with he/him pronouns.
He's here and always watching, the one you shouldn't have killed. I have seen him, the one you shouldn't have killed.
However, this isn't compelling evidence for a solid amount of the fandom, so let's look into this further. The one you shouldn't have killed is clearly a moniker referencing the victim. It doesn't seem to be referencing their animatronic because William didn't kill the animatronics. He put the people he killed into the animatronics. The phrase "he's here" has been written on Golden Freddy merchandise before, but I don't think merch is acceptable evidence on its own. While it is officially licensed, I doubt it's all been checked for accuracy. There are inaccuracies throughout the official guides, and I don't think it's unreasonable to assume the merch is the same. It's best to use evidence within the canonical media we have. There is no other instance in the games in which a spirit is referred to by the animatronic's pronouns rather than their own. There is, however, a common misconception that this is the case. In FNAF 2, there is a mini-game in which someone stands outside the restaurant. A man drives up, exits his car, and kills them. The child, presumably, possesses the puppet. In the background of the minigame, you can hear a deep voice, presumably the Faz talker we see in the FNAF 2 movie, although it's never stated, spelling something out. SAVEHIM. Save him. We can assume the him in question is the child we see outside the diner, but Charlie has exclusively been referred to with she/her pronouns. Many people assume that the him referred to in the minigame must be the puppet, who in UCN is given he/him pronouns. This wasn't the original assumption back when the Save Him minigame was first released. Many assumed the puppet was possessed by a little boy since Charlie, to put it simply, didn't exist yet. The franchise wasn't originally intended to be as long-running as it is. FNAF 4 was originally named Five Nights at Freddy's 4, the final chapter. None of the children were given names at that point. The first instance of the missing children being named in the games was in Pizzeria Simulator, released on December 4th, 2017. Pizza Simulator was also the first game to feature Henry Emily, who had yet to be referenced until that point. Even then, the name Henry comes from the novel trilogy. In Pizzeria Simulator, Henry is simply referred to as HRY223. This was presumably an attempt to integrate elements of the novel trilogy into the game series, as Henry is mentioned throughout. The first book was released in 2015, but the final book, The Fourth Closet, was released June 26, 2018, shortly after Pizzeria Simulator. Pizzeria Simulator, in short, served as advertising for the final book, as many of the elements of the game are new plot threads in the games that are heavily featured in the novel trilogy. Beyond the relationship between Henry and his daughter, this is the first time Elizabeth Afton is given a name in the games, and her personality throughout Pizzeria Simulator seems to be heavily inspired by her writing in the novel trilogy. While Elizabeth is soft yet deceptive in Sister Location, presumably with the ultimate plan to kill William Afton, she acts reckless and desperate to please in Pizzeria Simulator. This seems closer to her novel counterpart, who desires to prove herself to William for the majority of The Fourth Closet. Scrap Baby's personality change, regardless of the lore-related explanation, connects the novels to the games. Similarly, introducing Henry did the same. Considering the puppet spirit was never named, nor given a solid backstory, and most of Henry's characterization is connected to his grief of Charlie, I believe Charlie was retconned as the puppet to further connect the novels and games, probably to encourage people to buy the books for more information, although I'm not here to speculate on that. The original FNAF 2 sprite for the spirit possessing the puppet is entirely different. Sprite inconsistencies are nothing new, but these characters have different color schemes, features, and designs, and there wouldn't be a reason to change the design so drastically unless the spirit possessing the puppet was literally changed during development. The first child, either retconned out of existence or regulated to a different role, was originally the puppet and used he/him pronouns. The pronoun change between FNAF 2 and Pizzeria Simulator does not indicate that Charlie has been referred to with her animatronics pronouns, but rather that the spirit's identity changed sometime during development. Yes, the puppet's UCN description uses he/him, but it's explicitly referencing the puppet. Conversely, TOYSNHK refers to themselves as the one you shouldn't have killed, the victim, not the animatronic they go on to possess. And when considering the only instance a victim is given their animatronic's pronouns is likely due to a retcon, I do not think that TOYSNHK using he/him references the animatronic, not the spirit. I am aware that the voice actress, Tabitha Skanes, is a woman, but women frequently voice young boys. Regardless of sex, prior to voice cracks, all voices are of a similar pitch. Additionally, the voice listing explains that Scott wanted a voice that could be perceived as either a young boy or girl. This means that the spirit's gender is meant to be gleaned from an alternate source, that source being the sparse voice lines that use he/him for TOYSNHK. So yes, TOYSNHK is a boy, but that doesn't narrow down our list entirely. Part 4. The Golden Freddy in the Room. I can sense you running to tell me that Golden Freddy is TOYSNHK. I can feel it. So let's look at Golden TOYSNHK, or the belief that whoever is possessing Golden Freddy is the one you should not have killed. I'm aware that one of the biggest evidence pieces is the cutscene you can get at the end of 50/20 mode, but please put that aside for a later section. There are several things I want to establish first, and I'll have an entire section dedicated to UCN cutscenes. Golden TOYSNHK evidence within the cutscenes will be saved for then. There's a lot of things I think are important to address first. Regardless, Ultimate Custom Night is brimming with connections to Golden Freddy and Fredbear. Some people believe them to be separate, so I'm going to discuss both of them. To start, I don't think it's solid evidence that Golden Freddy is on the mobile version's loading screen. Not only do we not know the logistics behind the creation of the mobile port, which requires some changes to adapt, but it's a loading screen. This isn't literally happening to William, it's an aesthetic for the player. Similarly, U2's released a Golden Freddy figure with the phrase, "He's here and always watching." As I've said before, I don't like using merch as evidence. FNAF also just seems to like to reference itself in ways that don't seem to mean much of anything. Moon and Mystic Hippo quote Circus Baby's line from the novels, "What makes you so special?" In the FNAF 2 movie, Michael says, "Kids can be so heartless," which is presumably a reference to FNAF World where Mangle says, "Kids can be so cruel." In the week before, the main 4 animatronics say, "It's me," despite the phrase originating from Golden Freddy. FNAF AR also references Golden Freddy with unreliable canonicity. I will put an image on the screen of the character people believe to be a reference to Ultimate Custom Night. The thing is, FNAF AR is a now defunct game, and this Golden Freddy reskin from a creepy carnival that mostly seems to be for aesthetics is gone. It was presumably intended to be the first episode of an overarching FNAF AR story, but it got cancelled and was never completed. I feel like, as a result, it wouldn't be fair for the creators to use it for lore, considering you can literally no longer access the game. If content isn't accessible, it shouldn't be used at all. Considering the entire game was shut down, I don't think it makes fair evidence. Let's focus on UCN's direct connection to Fredbear. It's the first game to give us a model of Fredbear that isn't 8-bit. One of the teasers, rather than featuring an array of upcoming characters like all the others did, only displayed Fredbear. A teaser doesn't mean much, I'll admit. The puppet isn't in any FNAF 2 trailers, and it's basically the main character. So let's consider Fredbear's actual appearance. Fredbear isn't a selectable character, but if the player sets Golden Freddy's AI to 1 and uses a death coin, they will be jump scared by Fredbear. I would take any translations of these with a grain of salt because of how distorted the audio is, but I am going to get the translations from the wiki. This is "There's more fantasy and fun where I come from." Fredbear isn't referencing vengeance or TOYSNHK like many of the other animatronics do. He references William's origins. What made William, and why is TOYSNHK referencing it? Let's find a suit that's right for you. Why is Fredbear saying this? TOYSNHK doesn't want William to be stuffed in a suit. He doesn't want William to die in a suit like he already did in the past. TOYSNHK wants William to die to his own creations over and over again. But William's already experienced death inside a suit. Fredbear isn't here to be TOYSNHK. Fredbear is here to demonstrate where William came from and how he got here, by finding a suit that was right for whoever was stuffed in Fredbear. This will come back in a later section. I am sorry I keep making you wait. I'm trying to be organized with my sections. Let's briefly switch gears and focus on the Old Man Consequences, OMC, cutscene. Admittedly, not much is going on. We play as a little red bear, and OMC tells us to leave the demon to his demons and to rest our own soul, because there is nothing else. Your only option is to walk into the lake. The game will crash, and you'll end up right back where you started. There are only a couple of moments in this scene attributed as references to Golden Freddy. The first is the most obvious. We play as a little Freddy sprite, and Golden Freddy is obviously a derivative of Freddy. But this scene is technically an extended reference to FNAF World, so let's look into that scene. In doing so, we can determine exactly what the OMC cutscene means and what it has to do with Golden Freddy, if anything is at all. You can encounter OMC in multiple endings, the fourth glitch ending and the drowning ending. The drowning ending is probably the one UCN is based on, but we'll go over both just in case. Both endings require you to get several glitches, and you'll end up at OMC's lake. In the fourth glitch ending, OMC tells you that you've gone too far into the code and there isn't a way out. He offers you a fish, and you get a simple end text. The game's canonicity is odd. Scott reflected that he regretted integrating FNAF World into canon in a Doco interview, but the game itself seems hyper-aware of its own existence. However, these meta-references could simply imply that FNAF World is an in-universe game. After all, the FNAF 2 movie shows an arcade cabinet with the FNAF World gameplay. It's clear FNAF World takes place somewhere else. A pair of yellow eyes at the beginning claims that everything that happens here has an effect out there. This, alongside with various references to the nature of this game, imply that we are playing as someone in the FNAF universe, playing FNAF World. Throughout FNAF World, you can set up minigames that you will later play in FNAF 3 to get your happiest day. It's important to note because whoever is working with the puppet is this Freddy sprite. And it can't be the puppet because we've already ruled out Charlie being TOYSNHK. But it's not Golden Freddy either because Golden Freddy is clearly the receiver of Happiest Day. But FNAF World's drowning ending has a happiest day of its own. It is possible to climb into OMC's lake, not unlike how TOYSNHK does in UCN. However, instead of the game crashing, Freddy falls through a dark screen. We then immediately cut to this. I've heard people think that this is an angel with wings, although I haven't actually seen that interpretation in a long time, and I can't remember where I first saw it. But to me, it looks like 3 people watching TV. It seems like the taller person in the center has their arms around the 2 smaller figures, backs to the viewer as they stare at what seems to be a TV. If you decompile the text for the cutscene, you can find the words, happiest day. The player doesn't appear in this scene. The player set up happiest day, but if we're playing as TOYSNHK, which the OMC cutscene seems to imply, the player never got their happiest day then. They never moved on. Until now. This is TOYSNHK's happiest day. A scene completely different from Golden Freddy's happiest day. The sprite we play as is just Freddy, not Golden Freddy. And while they are derivatives of the same character, it is worth noting that this is a player avatar of a Five Nights at Freddy's game. A generic Freddy avatar makes sense. I didn't intend to go on and on about FNAF World, but I actually bothered to look into it for once for this, and I think I might understand it. But this isn't about FNAF World, this is about Golden Freddy. I've seen a few people argue that Golden Freddy is the most vengeful because the hardest custom night modes for FNAF 2 and Sister Location are titled Golden Freddy. For starters, Sister Location's custom night isn't canon. If I had to guess an explanation for the name of the night, I'd assume it's a reference to FNAF 2. Because Golden Freddy isn't even in this game, unless you assume he's Yendo or the Mystery Springlock suit. Regardless, he doesn't appear as himself explicitly without theorization. FNAF 2's custom night is important, but that's the thing. In the first 2 games, the player gets fired for tampering with the animatronics. This presumably does have lore implications we'll get to later, but it seems to be a reference to the player's ability to manipulate the animatronics AI in the custom night, since it only occurs in the 2 canon custom nights. which means that Golden Freddy isn't displaying this aggression. The player is, against themselves, which is probably a bad sign that will come up later. Golden Freddy isn't nearly as aggressive as people give him credit for, I'm sorry to say this. In FNAF 1, Golden Freddy can only show up once per night, and has a 1 in 34,464 chance to do so every second. I can't say for sure how often that is, but I can say it's very rare, and continuously flipping the camera up and down does not increase your odds, just to clear up that misconception. Personally, despite my efforts, I've never gotten a Golden Freddy appearance, in FNAF 1 at least. Golden Freddy's AI is much more complicated in FNAF 2, but I'll try my best to explain. I don't know much about probability or statistics, but I'll try my best. At first, Golden Freddy can only get to AI level 1. Golden Freddy has a 1 in 1,000 chance on nights 2 and 3, a 1 in 100 chance in nights 4 and 5, and a 1 in 10 chance for the first 2 hours of night 6. At 2 o'clock on the 6th night, his AI is automatically set to 3. Presumably, this increased aggression in night 6 is after an incident that happens at the restaurant that specifically sets him off.
Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right.
Every 5 seconds, Golden Freddy has an AI level in 20 chance of appearing. Admittedly, those odds are higher but still low, especially in comparison to the other animatronics whose AIs gradually rise throughout the game. Getting rid of Golden Freddy isn't really anything special either. In the first game, you have 5 seconds to flip up the camera and he'll leave. In FNAF 2, you just use the Freddy mask. Unless he's in the hall, in which case flipping the camera up still works. Golden Freddy is odd and unique, but not especially aggressive. The threat he poses doesn't come from aggression, it comes from unpredictability. You don't expect a giant golden bear to show up in your face. He's using the element of surprise. He's a little kid playing a prank, on rare occasions when he's not on an iPad in the back. In the first game, Golden Freddy doesn't give you a game over screen at all. The game crashes instead. Naturally, I can't assume this element is in-universe, but if it was, personally, I would read this as Golden Freddy awkwardly pushing you out of the restaurant instead of killing you, if you want that image. While characters' aggression and antagonism have changed throughout different continuities, especially as of recently, it is worth noting that Golden Freddy doesn't attack anyone in the novel trilogy. If anything, all he does is help and talk to the protagonists. Many, including me, assumed he'd be the vengeful spirit in the movies, but we see him move on with the others in FNAF 2 with no indication of sticking around. He only seemed to be trapping William in the back room before William died for good. His goals, if anything, seem centered around Abby. In the first movie, he primarily seems to want to separate her from Mike and kill her so they can be best ghost friends forever. In the second movie, he just shows up at the end to rescue her. Pretty cut and dry if you ask me. There is one continuity with a character people suspect is Golden Freddy that is the vengeful spirit. And as a result, I feel obligated to bring it up. Part 5. Let's talk about Andrew. Andrew TOYSNHK is honestly something I didn't know was so popular when I read Fazbear Frights. Frights for short. So I'm mostly looking at connections other people have made rather than my own. For those of you who don't know, Fazbear Frights is a short story anthology with an overarching thread, often referred to as the Stitch Line. Which stories make up the Stitch Line has been hotly debated, so I can't exactly define it for you. Andrew is the closest equivalent we get to TOYSNHK in Frights. We don't actually know how much of what he's doing is similar to UCN, but the concept is still there. In The Man in Room 1280, William Afton's burnt but alive body is kept in a hospital. Several nurses at the hospital spot Andrew, a little boy in an alligator mask. Doctors find that William seems to have two forms of consciousness inside his head, two entities fighting for control. They study his REM sleep and conclude that he's having nightmares. A nurse tries to kill William, sensing that he's evil, but Andrew stops her. He wants to keep William alive. William writes a message that he wants to go to the Fazbear Entertainment Distribution Center, where he explodes. He full-on blows up. His and Andrew's agony spreads amongst the objects in the center. Andrew briefly becomes a robotic dog named Fetch, but the battery is removed and placed into the Stitch Wraith. Jake McNally, a little boy who died of cancer in hospice care, possesses the Stitch Wraith's mask, as it's from a doll he had a strong emotional connection to. Through Andrew and Jake's discussions, we learn that Andrew doesn't remember exactly what William did to him, just that he knows William needs to pay. He does eventually move on, while Jake stays behind to help the other victims. Whether Andrew was literally putting William in UCN when he somehow ended up in his brain, or he was conducting another ambiguous form of torture, Andrew is definitely the Fright's equivalent of TOYSNHK. This, however, doesn't make him TOYSNHK in the games. Building off of Golden TOYSNHK, many believe that Andrew is Golden Freddy. In the short story, The New Kid, a boy named Devin accidentally springlocks his classmate, Kelsey. However, when he reaches into the suit, he finds curly black hair instead of Kelsey's blonde hair. For this to be used as evidence that Andrew is TOYSNHK in the games, however, relies on us believing Golden TOYSNHK. It can't stand on its own. If Golden TOYSNHK isn't true, then this evidence doesn't matter. So instead, we're going to be focusing more on evidence that doesn't relate to Golden Freddy. Let me start with the fact that the Man in Room 1280 cannot be canon to the games in any way. Nightmarion says, "This time death cannot save you," implying that William has died before. But notably, the Man in Room 1280 is alive. As I was saying, the state took him off life support. Nurse Ackerman continued with the air of someone long suffering. Even so, he wouldn't die. William isn't even in a suit. It's implied he may have metal inside of him, but his body isn't torn apart like you'd expect from a springlock suit. The body has a head, a torso, 2 arms, and 2 legs. Scraptrap, who should have experienced the fire that got William's body to the state that it is, only has 1 arm. The state of this torment also seems to vary. When describing the 2 electromagnetic signals in William's brain, a nurse says, "But they're at odds with each other. We think they're tormenting each other." While I think TOYSNHK is definitely going through it, William isn't exactly able to fight back. Throughout UCN, all you can do is sit there and try not to die. You don't have the ability to fight TOYSNHK or torment them in return. All of TOYSNHK's suffering is self-inflicted. Andrew's memories of his life remain spotty. He doesn't know why he's tormenting William, while TOYSNHK seems very, very aware of his position. While I doubt constant torment is great for your memory, TOYSNHK knows a lot about himself and about William.
I guess you forgot about me.
TOYSNHK is aware of William's relationship with his daughter and the way he abandoned her in a bunker.
I was the first. I have seen everything.
TOYSNHK knows who William's first victim was.
This is how it feels, and you get to experience it over and over and over again.
TOYSNHK remembers what happened to them and how it felt. He wants William to experience it too.
Let me put you back together, then take you apart all over again.
TOYSNHK specifically references the phrase, "I will put you back together," implying that he remembers William using the phrase in the past.
This time, there is more than an illusion to fear.
TOYSNHK is aware of the nightmare animatronics and knows they were originally illusions. TOYSNHK knows and recognizes too much to be Andrew, especially considering he is never mentioned in the games. Some people think he's this boy in the background of Happiest Day. If we assume this is an alligator mask like Andrew's, that could be the case. That being said, there are several kids in the background of this scene with no apparent relevance. If these are other victims, there isn't anything special about them. There is no indication of who these people are. The thing about a mystery is that it's meant to be solvable. Subscribe for more hot takes, I guess. TOYSNHK's identity should be solvable within the games. I think it's more than reasonable to use other continuities as supporting evidence, but it needs to be backed up with information in the games, and the name Andrew has never appeared in them. The one to conclude our story by trapping himself with William should not be someone we don't know. Maybe you disagree, but I don't think TOYSNHK would be anyone who has never even been mentioned. Andrew TOYSNHK requires you to take things directly from Frights, but the main book where the UCN equivalent is featured directly contradicts the games. At best, Andrew serves as a narrative parallel to TOYSNHK, but narrative parallels aren't narrative copies. You can't copy-paste information from one parallel to another. It's clear that I don't believe in Andrew TOYSNHK, considering the topic of this whole thing, and I'm going to get to that. But first, we have to set up a basic timeline and cast of characters. Part 6. MikeBro and CassidyVictim. A lot of people assume MikeBro by default. This is for a number of reasons, but still, I want to be fair to the people who don't believe it. I don't believe in a lot of the theories that people consider default assumptions, so I want to try my best to give service to everyone. I've read up on MikeVictim and, to a lesser extent, MikeNeither, so I'd like to think I can debunk them in good faith. Granted, they've never appealed to me personally, so I'm sorry if my bias shines through. I can try my best to remain objective, but that's hard to do. Let's jump right into the survival logbook. The survival logbook is an in-universe guide for new night guards. Someone writes and crosses out the name Mike. Despite the fact that the name is crossed out, the handwriting mirrors the rest of the notes in red pen throughout. So we're going to go with that. This is very obviously Mike Afton. He references sister location frequently, something only Michael Afton would have experienced. I don't think I've ever seen anyone insinuate otherwise, but I figured it was worth clarifying. Throughout the book, there are a couple of forms of alternate communication. A faint, faded text we'll call faded, and a text of the book itself that seems to have been altered. We'll call this one altered. Altered and faded are two different people, but for MikeVictim to work, they have to be the same person. Because most of the altered text is next to numbers, in which the night guard is supposed to rank elements of their night, a MikeVictim interpretation of the logbook requires these to be statements that Mike is presumably meant to circle how much he agrees with. Or at least this is the interpretation I see most often. But not only do we not see any of these hypothetical circles, but many of these statements would need to be answered with just a simple yes or no. While a spirit saying they can't see makes sense considering this is ghost logic. If Mike couldn't see, he couldn't respond to this question. The closest Mike gets to answering any of these questions is referencing the nightmares. But the page's prompt is also about dreams, so even then he may not be addressing the spirits. Mike only answers the questions the book provides, while Altered actually responds to Faded. Mike only explicitly acknowledges the ghosts at one point, but I'll get to that soon. Faded announces the party was meant for you. If Faded is also altered, what would be the purpose of repeating this statement? Is Mike supposed to rank how much of the party was for him? What does that mean? It was for me. The response is written before the question, but they're ghosts. We don't know if the messages have to be consecutive, or if they just appear on the pages Mike is on, or even if the ghosts can control where they show up. From a meta perspective, I guess this just depends on what makes a cool puzzle. It's the same reason why Altered references that they can't see but still manages to write. If Altered were speaking to Mike, this wouldn't make sense. Mike is reading this book and even replies to a few of the book's prompts. It's not like Altered would need him to rank his sight. They would just need him to be able to read and understand this book. Admittedly, Altered's responses to Faded aren't super sensical. They aren't simple examples of call and response. For example, I'm scared doesn't really seem to be a response to anything in particular. That being said, Faded asks Altered a lot of basic questions about their memory. Altered is clearly not fully aware of their own situation. It's not hard to believe that their answers may be disjointed or awkward. For example, Faded asks, was your favorite childhood toy a plastic purple telephone? So, who are Altered and Faded? Altered is generally considered to be the crying child, CC, excluding in Mike victim circles. Alongside the party was meant for you and its response it was for me seemingly referencing the big bite, Faded asks a lot of questions that clearly reference CC. Does he still talk to you, for example, on a page of what is a Golden Freddy plush, which presumably looks similar to the Fredbear plush. They ask about a toy that can be seen in the FNAF 4 minigames. They ask about the Fredbear plush and whether it still talks to him. This is something pretty exclusive to CC. Throughout the book, certain page numbers are altered. Faded writes my name on all of these pages, but Altered is the one providing the coordinates. It seems like Faded is prompting Altered into giving their name, because Altered is the one providing the hints, while Faded asks what their name is. Using the altered and obscured page numbers, you get the letters CASSID in the word search. Mike provides the final coordinates to get the name Cassidy. This is someone Mike knows and someone he wants to help. Whoever this child is, they're someone Mike would finally respond to the ghosts for. If you fill out all the answers in the word search, the name Cassidy and a few additional phrases, including prompting Faded for their name, you're only left with the phrase, "It's me," over and over again. Altered text. Because Altered is Cassidy. CC is Cassidy. This book isn't about Faded. Throughout the book, Faded asks Altered a variety of questions about himself. This book should be giving us Altered's name. I know people think CC's name comes from the Foxy Grid. The Foxy Grid has been solved a number of ways. People have gotten Dave, Evan, I Am Springtrap, Adam, and others. There are no set ways to place letters, nor are there any instructions to find coordinates as explicit as there are for the word search. Faded writes a few numbers in the Foxy Grid, but Altered never reacts to it. There isn't any reason to connect CC to the Foxy Grid, other than people not knowing where else to find his name. This book isn't about Faded or finding their name because Faded's memory seems perfectly intact. They and Mike are trying to help Cece, trying to help Cassidy remember who he is. So, who is Faded? It's not really relevant, but if I had to guess, I'd say Charlie. It doesn't make much sense for some random missing child to know about Cece's toys, his favorite ride, and things like that. The telephone seems to have been at his house. It doesn't seem like Cassidy is popular. Everyone on the street is neutral to him or outwardly hostile. While I don't think it's impossible that he knew the missing children while alive, it's very likely he knew Charlie. They both had extremely neglectful fathers. Henry references not being the day Charlie was shut out and left to die, and in the movies she seems to consider the marionette more of a parent than him. And it seems like Cassidy was mostly dumped home alone with his older brother. If William and Henry worked together, chances are Charlie would have come over, whether Henry could feel less like he's leaving her home alone, or if he and William ever had, awkward dinners with the kids. Charlie is also just generally more aware.
The others are like animals, but I am very aware.
She's the one trying to give the children their happiest day. Let me clarify, Cassidy is not the little girl from the novels. Yes, there is a missing child named Cassidy in the novels, but she possesses Bonnie. Reused names aren't anything new, even for people that are in the same category, say, missing children or security guards. Michael Brooks is also a missing child in the novels. Elizabeth seems to be an only child, and her brother's names could have easily been recycled. If this Cassidy and Golden Freddy's Cassidy were the same, why would Scott change what animatronic she possesses? Cassidy isn't a particular standout in the novels. Would it just be to make her more special? It's not like Cassidy is particularly prominent in the games either. None of the missing children really are. Golden Freddy uses a stock sound titled Laugh Giggle Girl, but as I've said before, children's voices cannot meaningfully be differentiated by sex. Freddy also uses the sound, and he is canonically possessed by a boy. The first game was made by some guy using stock sounds to cobble together a game in a few months. I don't think he was paying attention to that. I also don't think this girl in the survival logbook is Cassidy. The girl is receiving a cake from the puppet alongside the quote, "Reflect on the happiest day of your life." That being said, for this to be Cassidy, someone would have had to have seen her, drawn her, and somehow referenced happiest day even though they would have no idea about it. Or one of the spirits would have had to alter the image, which is not something we see happen at all through this book. This also heavily relies on Cassidy receiver, or the belief that Cassidy is receiving the cake in happiest day. And it is, it's Cassidy as in CC. The person who never got his perfect birthday, and when he finally did, he was able to move on. The party was meant for him. I generally see the main counter-argument for this being from Return to the Pit, RTTP, to prove that Cassidy is a missing little girl. RTTP presumably takes place in the Frights universe, considering it's a spin-off of Into the Pit, ITP, a book in Frights. Notably, ITP contradicts the game several times. There are 6 missing kids, and they're all found moments after, something even referenced in a later book. RTTP is also, to put it simply, nonsensical. Oswald can get shot in the ball pit. Oswald can alter the timeline by reversing the MCI. There are bunny ears that give you a lobotomy. RTTP references a missing girl 2 times. The first is in this image. This is Susie. Pixel art is an extremely limited medium, but you can wear ringlets and pigtails. I also don't think this is black hair. It's in black and white. It's really hard for me to tell personally. Similarly, Oswald references a girl with curly hair. First of all, if Cassidy is the girl from the logbook, she has straight hair. Second of all, Susie does have curly hair. Ringlets are curls. Oswald passes out cake to the missing children with the final piece of cake to the girl with curly hair. This is the event where he reverses the MCI. He returns to the future, where it never even happened. This isn't the happiest day. Oswald is going in the opposite order. Susie died first, so she receives the cake last. The receiver of the happiest day would receive their cake first. The final reference I've seen is a cut image from the ITP game. For whatever reason, this was cut, which means it's not reliable evidence. Admittedly, for CassidyVictim to be canon, Cece has to be an MCI victim, considering Cassidy is the fifth missing child and possesses Golden Freddy. The thing is, most people seem to misremember what we actually know about the MCI, which is next to nothing, like everything. Let me read some documents out for you. Kids vanish at local pizzeria, bodies not found. 2 local children were reportedly lured into a back room during the late hours of operation at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza on the night of June 26th. While video surveillance identified the man responsible and led to his capture the following morning, the children themselves were never found and are presumed dead. Police think that the suspect dressed as a company mascot to earn the children's trust. 5 children now reported missing. Suspect convicted. 5 children are now linked to the incident at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, where a man dressed as a cartoon mascot lured them into a back room. While the suspect has been charged, the bodies themselves were never found. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has been fighting an uphill battle ever since to convince families to return to the pizzeria. It is a tragedy. Local pizzeria threatened with shutdown over sanitation. Local pizzeria, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, has been threatened again with shutdown by the health department over reports of foul odor coming from the much-loved animal mascots. Police were contacted when parents reportedly noticed what appeared to be blood and mucus around the eyes and mouths of the mascots. One parent likened them to reanimated carcasses. Local pizzeria said to close by year's end. After a long struggle to stay in business after the tragedy that struck there many years ago, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has announced that it will be closed by year's end. Despite a year-long search for a buyer, companies seem unwilling to be associated with the company. These characters will live on in the hearts of kids. These characters will live on. CEO. Contrary to popular belief, 5 children were not lured to the back room by William in a Bonnie suit. 2 children were caught on camera being lured to a back room by someone in a mascot suit. Presumably, this means that the MCI took place over a few days, or at least a few hours. 5 children were linked to the incident. We don't know how. Presumably, they either also went missing at Freddy's or were seen with someone in a mascot suit. Or the police had some other reason to connect them to Freddy's. There are a number of reasons. I don't expect the police's logic to be good, especially considering they never checked the suits that smelled like death and were leaking blood and mucus. We all know Cassidy gets bit. He ends up in the hospital for an indeterminate amount of time before he flatlines. That being said, it seems like he was taken home. Mike draws nightmare on the logbook, but it's clear the nightmares he has are related to Cassidy in some way. Whether it's guilt or Cassidy is haunting him, or it's William's experiments trying to make him feel worse. Pills, flowers, and an IV drip can appear in the FNAF 4 gameplay. It's worth noting that all of these are supplies you could bring home, and William is, as we've seen, an incredibly possessive man, constantly reiterating that his kids will always be his. In Help Wanted's Curse of Dreadbear DLC, we're met with a Frankenstein's monster version of Fredbear. His name was originally Franken-Freddy, but the name change indicates he was likely meant to be associated with Fredbear more than Freddy. That and Fredbear's UCN voice lines were recycled for this DLC. We, as the player, have to revive Dreadbear, particularly by stimulating his brain to restart it. Beyond the obvious reviving Fredbear thing, the DLC is riddled with FNAF 4 imagery. The house in the menu of FNAF 4 is in the distance of the gameplay, and there's a cake with 7 candles, which is a pretty reasonable age for Cassidy to be, I think. William is absolutely the one speaking to Cassidy through his Fredbear plush. Not only do we see what appears to be a walkie-talkie or remote in front of the Fredbear plush in Sister Location, but it also speaks like William. People claim that this plush may have some supernatural or imaginary elements because it can teleport, but I don't think it can. It's hard to use 8-bit figures to hold things. It's not even that no one addresses the Fredbear plush's existence. A kid asks where it is, but it's because Cassidy put him down behind the car. The FNAF 4 minigames aren't super literal. The Afton house doesn't have a kitchen, and it's got 2 bedrooms for a family of at least 4. The Fredbear plush suggests that he'll put Cassidy back together. Mike references this phrase in Sister Location when he says he put Elizabeth back together. I've said before, but it's not abnormal for FNAF to repeat lines without much of a reason, but these contexts are similar. Mike is referencing something William told him to do for one of his siblings. William's possessive behavior doesn't necessarily seem to extend to just one kid. In FNAF 2, he seems to apply this possessive behavior to both children. The Fredbear plush is also generally unhelpful. It tells Cassidy that his brother hates him and that his only option is to just be tormented by him. It's not protective. Its only solution is to just get things over with. And if anything, it seems to want to tear Cassidy and his brother apart. Siblings bully each other all the time. It rarely means they hate each other. And William would have the most to gain if Cassidy and his brother hated each other. No one else would be invested in sibling drama other than an abusive father who would rather his victims fight with each other instead of him. This is Cassidy's evil dad. His evil dad who promised to put him back together. And we see someone jumpstart a brain by putting it in Dreadbear. William's general solution to eternal life is to shove a kid into an animatronic suit and see what happens. If he shoved 4 kids into suits, maybe out of rage or to test how to revive someone, and they started acting erratic, he could have gotten an idea. I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that the guy that revives people with robots would try to revive his son with a robot. To find a suit that was right for him. William's seen his desired effect work out with 4 other children, and he's already gotten caught in a suit that only a few employees would be able to access. Even if the Springlock suits weren't discontinued after the bite, you'd probably have to be a reasonable height and weight, and be qualified to perform in one. Even if he was arrested, it wouldn't have been for long. After all, he was able to do a lot after. William seems to have been the charming town sweetheart, according to the novels, but he would have been insanely suspicious unless he was missing his own son. his dying son. We don't know how 3 other children were linked to those 2 children caught on camera. I think there could have been several connections that led Cassidy to be considered a member of the MCI. The first being that it was around the same time period, and Cassidy is connected to Freddy's by virtue of his dad owning the place. The second being that William could have easily claimed to have brought him to Freddy's to watch him alongside his work, only for him to coincidentally disappear. The final being that he could have been seen bringing Cassidy to Freddy's, or just to the back room, or wherever, in the Bonnie suit. I totally understand the details aren't perfectly clean, but I think that the Curse of Dreadbear DLC is pretty upfront about what William did to Cassidy to put him back together. There are only enough animatronics for 5 kids, assuming William doesn't want to use Spring Bonnie, and I don't believe William would put his son in an animatronic that he had already put a child in. I can't quite verbalize why I think the Aftons have a superiority complex other than that I've seen them and heard them. I will put graphic novel screenshots on the screen if I think I can come up with a proper explanation. Golden Freddy also only has 1 soul possessing him. The amount of victims we see depends on the context. In Help Wanted 2, we see 6 victims, 1 kid per animatronic, 5 missing kids, and Charlie. Now would be a good time to indicate that Golden Freddy has 2 spirits. 2 puppets, or maybe 2 Voltron figures you could merge together. Or maybe they're Transformers, I can't tell. We're only ever shown 1 kid associated with Golden Freddy. The closest equivalent is the bad ending screen in FNAF 3. Many people assume this screen has 2 eyes lit up in Golden Freddy, but Golden Freddy only has 1 eye lit up. This is especially obvious if you turn up the brightness a lot. Golden Freddy's head is just angled in a way that the light filters through the other eye. The others have the same effect, but to a lesser extent because they're less front-facing. The Curse of Dreadbear and FNAF World do both show 7 graves, and I guess one of the UCN cutscenes implies 7 victims as well, but we'll get to that later. Let's go with the assumption that one of the kids' deaths is associated with Fredbear because one of the graves is closer to Fredbear than the purple guy. Let's assume that's Cassidy. The other 6 do not need to be 5 MCI members plus Charlie. They could easily be 4 of the MCI victims, Charlie, and Elizabeth. William did kill Elizabeth, even if he didn't intend on killing her. He built a child-killing robot, told her that it was for her, and clearly wasn't watching her well enough to stop her from running off. I'm sorry, but I think that counts. There are a couple of instances of dual possession in Frights. The main one you've probably heard of is the Stitch Wraith, but there's also Rosie Porkchop in Together Forever. Although I can't really compare her to Golden Freddy because those 2 kids are taken by the suit at the exact same time and refer to themselves in the plural as your ladies in waiting, while Golden Freddy notably speaks in the singular. The Stitch Wraith, however, isn't an example of dual possession in the way people think. Andrew possesses the battery and Jake possesses the mask. Golden Freddy isn't made of individual pieces like the Stitch Wraith is. Most people only connect the Stitch Wraith to Golden Freddy because they believe in Golden TOYSNHK, which I addressed earlier, believing Cassidy to be an Andrew parallel and Jake to be a CC parallel. That being said, I don't think Jake is a logical CC parallel. The concept of CC being the virtuous spirit is largely fanon. We don't know how he feels about people, but judging by his confusion in the logbook, I assume he's probably not able to coherently decide how he feels either. Jake dies in hospice care, like CC seems to, but Jake is in hospice from natural causes. He's not connected to Freddy's at all, while CC's story is intrinsically linked to the larger timeline. He's an Afton, and his death closed down one of the locations. Cassidy is the only one possessing Golden Freddy. The Stitch Wraith is not Golden Freddy, and Cassidy is the crying child. But that leaves us with the question, who is Mike? Once again, I have looked into MikeVictim and Mike Neither. Generally, a lot of the pushback I've seen against MikeBro, or that Mike is the foxy bully and crying child's older brother, is that they think the foxy bully is mean, and they don't want a mean protagonist. Personally, if William Afton was my dad, I'd be kind of mean too. Besides, I don't think being a jerk at like 11 to 14 years old makes you irredeemable. Yes, even if you're really mean. I think people think the joke in the survival logbook, he tripped and fell on Freddy's teeth, not our fault, implies that MikeBro isn't canon because the older brother said he was sorry, and this is very clearly making fun of the big bite. But he is telling a joke. He tells a lot of jokes in this book. I don't fully know how to explain this other than you get it if you have siblings. Granted, I've spent a while talking about CassidyVictim, so I probably don't need to reiterate all the points against MikeVictim since they are contradictory to CassidyVictim by default. So let's take a look at Mike Neither and compare it to MikeBro. If you already believe in MikeBro, because I know it's popular, you can go ahead and skip to the next section. I don't really blame you. For starters, we can't use the movies for this meaningfully. The Afton family has never been consistent. Elizabeth is an only child in the novels, while the brothers from FNAF 4 are heavily implied to be Aftons. Michael isn't an Afton in the novels, but he specifically refers to William as his father in the games. Even if Vanessa is an Afton in the games, she would have been born at least 20 years later in the games than she is in the movies. So Michael can be whatever he's got going on in the movies while still being the foxy bully in the games. Mike's sprite is inconsistent with the foxy bullies. Sprites are never consistent in this franchise. He's also theoretically possessed by Ennard at this point. Death whitewashed him. I doubt Scott knows how rot works, but yeah, people tend to look paler and kind of purple when they don't have blood under their skin. This effect is different when you have enough melanin, but I don't think Scott knows that. We rarely see instances of 4 Afton kids. The closest instance I've seen is what I call Mini Rena Afton family. Reading off the Theory Wiki page, if Ballora represents and/or is Mrs. Afton, then the 4 Mini Renas could represent the 4 Afton children. Personally, I think this relies too heavily on Ballora being Mrs. Afton, a theory that mostly seems to be around vibes. I also doubt the Mini Renas are related to the Afton kids. There isn't anything specific about them that scream Afton kids, and they don't have any distinguishing traits. Personally, I feel like the plush babies represent the Afton kids, but they have distinct features that differentiate them from one another. I don't have much of an opinion on the concept of the Fun Times being based on the Aftons, but I think that has more merit. For something to represent people, there need to be similar elements. The Mini Renas just don't have anything setting them apart from each other. Something that may represent the Aftons is this table in Security Breach. Unless there's another family with a headless child. There are 5 members, and I don't necessarily think there's an empty seat. The organization is like this because it's even and easy for the player to access. So the headless bot is obviously Cassidy, and the ice cream bot resembles Circus Baby enough for us to assume it's Elizabeth. That being said, there seem to be some metaphorical elements to the staff bot assignments. It's hard to say with Mrs. Afton since we don't know anything about her. William being a magician is pretty interesting. William continuously seems to consider himself a mad scientist, but to a fantastical extent. The theme for the minigame of Charlie's death in Pizzeria Simulator is called Alchemist's Fantasy. Yes, alchemists aren't necessarily magicians, but I doubt they have a mad scientist bot. This is also the mimic's approximation of the Afton family, or at least I assume so. In GGY, Gregory, under Glitchtrap's possession, describes himself as the wizard's favorite apprentice. After all, messing around with souls is arguably magic, or the sci-fi horror approximation of it. If the bot on the left next to the ice cream bot is Mike, why isn't he a security bot? If William is a magician, Mike is a server. This doesn't literally mean he works day shifts at Freddy's, although William does seem like the type to hire his kids so he doesn't have to pay them. Mike has never been in control of his own narrative. He died because he did something just like William asked him to. He may be a night guard, but he's also a metaphorical server. There are 3 Afton children, and yes, Mike is the oldest and the foxy bully from FNAF 4. Even if we discard Fazbear Fright's obsession with older siblings dying horrible deaths that often involve possession or loss of organs, which happens more often than you'd think, 2 of the Afton children we have already died. But those Fazbear Frights examples, real quick. Pete Dinglewood bullies his younger brother, only to die and somehow remain conscious while his hand and eye are removed and donated. Mott flushes his little brother's sea bonnies, which are sea monkeys but bonny, only to accidentally drink them, turn purple or blue, and get possessed by them. Alec fights with his sister, only to get his body stolen by a Freddy doll. Angel eats some candy from her sister, only for it to turn her into candy, where she is then eaten. Just a few examples I can recall. While the Curse of Dreadbear DLC implies that Cassidy was revived, he was revived as a bear, as Fredbear. Well, a bear with a name that rhymes with Fredbear. And his staff bot has no head, which is pretty damning if you ask me. Mike, on the other hand, doesn't reference having died before, which I think is a pretty important piece of information, and I would have brought it up if I died a second time. Mike seems to own the logbook when working as a night guard. When this happens won't matter until a later section, but it is worth noting that in this book, the night guard is clearly depicted as Foxy. Furthermore, Sister Location is riddled with references to the protagonist's past. Hand Unit, to some extent, is personalized to Mike. It has his name attached to it, so I always interpreted it as William's method of annoying him. I kind of assumed it was getting things wrong on purpose to rage bait him, since it's already got a label with his name. When Mike attempts to select a voice, he receives Angsty Teen.
Welcome back for another night of intellectual stimulation, pivotal career choices, and self-reflection on past mistakes.
This, of course, occurs moments before the Angsty Teen voice is selected for Mike. Foxy Bully's age also lines up much better than, for example, CC. As I'll discuss in a later section, Mike works as a night guard at Freddy's in 1987. If we do assume CC was 7 in 1983, he'd be 11. While William probably isn't above child labor, I think people would notice an 11-year-old working at Freddy's. The animatronics, at least in the novels, seem to target adults and older teens. So I don't think they'd exhibit any aggression to a little kid. Mike would be, if I'm going off of that earlier 11 to 14 ballpark, would probably be about 15 to 18. Charlie and her friends were attacked by the animatronics at 17, so Mike would be in about that range. Finally, I think the Foxy Bully would have the most reason to go through all this. We have no idea what Cassidy's relationship with his father was, but considering his dad almost entirely spoke to him via stuffed toy, it was probably near non-existent. William seems to use guilt as a form of control.
And help me clean up the mess that you created!
Vanessa clearly doesn't want to help William, but she did for a long time. Regardless of what William held over her head, he clearly took advantage of her guilt. Why would anyone come back to Circus Baby's entertainment and rental after nearly getting spring-locked unless they felt like they owed it to someone? I know a lot of people don't accept this is the logical way a story would go as evidence, but this is a story. I'm going to treat it like one. And in my opinion, it makes the most logical and narrative sense for Mike to be the foxy bully while Cassidy is the crying child. This is integral to the main point of this theory, but so are a few more details we need to cover. Part 7. A proper sequence of events. This is not going to be a full timeline, but for the sake of this video, we need to establish a few things. We need to order the following games: FNAF 1, FNAF 2, FNAF 3, FNAF World, Sister Location, and Pizzeria Simulator. We also need the protagonists of the following games: FNAF 1, FNAF 2, FNAF 3, FNAF 4, FNAF World, Sister Location, and Pizzeria Simulator. Let's start with the protagonists. At the end of FNAF 1, we receive a check addressed to Mike Schmidt. This is very likely Mike Afton. Since they're both security guards named Mike is no longer valid evidence, let's look at everything else. In the week before, Ralph says they haven't replaced him yet on his 6th night. Quote, "They let you know they're still looking for your replacement, as there haven't been any responses to their advertisement yet." End quote. Considering this is meant to be the week before Mike's shift, this would mean he was hired the following day and immediately went to work the day after. That, or he was hired the day of his first night. Mike is fired for tampering with the animatronics, seemingly a reference to the fact that you can manipulate the animatronics AI in the custom night. This means Mike is actually altering the animatronics AI, which I don't think just anyone would know how to do. I don't know much about AI, but I feel like someone would have had to teach him how to do that. Mike Afton references an extreme distaste for the classic animatronics in the logbook. I just feel like if they tried to kill him, that would make more sense. He also knows a few details about working at the location, like getting free pizza and stuff. I hope he abused that privilege. FNAF 4 also has a phone call from FNAF 1 with the audio messed around with. I don't know why Mike Schmidt, certified normal guy, would be having nightmares that seem clearly connected to Cassidy. Mike Schmidt does have a lot of dreams in the movies, but Vanessa's dream is much more reminiscent of the FNAF 4 nightmares. Mike Schmidt in the movies shares a lot of elements with Mike Afton. This will be important in a later section. Mike Schmidt is drawn to a clearly suspicious job over and over again and hopes he'll figure out what happened to his brother. Mike Afton is drawn to a clearly suspicious job over and over again and hopes he can put his sister back together. Mike Schmidt crumbles under the pressure of taking care of his little sister, and it nearly ends in her getting spring-locked. Mike Afton crumbles under the pressure of taking care of his little brother, and it leads to a spring-lock suit crushing him. Mike Afton also pretty consistently goes by Mike, with the exception of the time he's speaking to his abusive father. Mike Schmidt is more than likely a decomposite character derived from Mike Afton, something I'll get to later. And listen, I know the movies have two Michaels, but they go by different names. This isn't the case in the games. Mike Afton calls himself Michael in the same game where he has a little label on the hand unit that says Mike. This is very minor evidence, also, since appearances have never been consistent, but I guess I should bring up that the game over screen shows someone with blue eyes. Mike Schmidt has huge brown eyes, and Mike Afton has spooky, scary blue eyes. Like I said, not very reliable evidence. It wouldn't stand on its own. That being said, I feel like we have enough evidence otherwise to assume that yes, Mike Afton is Mike Schmidt. There are two protagonists of FNAF 2. I don't think Jeremy Fitzgerald is anyone relevant, contrary to popular belief. He's probably the victim of the bite of 87. He's moved to the day shift at the end of the week, and the bite seems to have occurred during the day, since in FNAF 1, Ralph says that the animatronics lost their ability to roam around during the day because of the bite of 87.
You'll be on day shift. Wear your uniform. Stay close to the animatronics and make sure they don't hurt anyone, okay?
The week before heavily implies the bite happened to an employee. Quote, in the aftermath of the bite of 87, staff spread tips around the restaurant of how to slow or stop animatronics if they ever attacked again. End quote. Quote, but, like you said in one of your training videos for the restaurant, you can't spell team without M and E. After the bite of 87, you heard some of the staff twist that around too. You can't spell team without M-E-A-T. End quote. And finally, quote, though, as far as you know, Foxy's never bitten any kids. End quote. If Jeremy is the bite victim, he can't be anyone important later in the timeline. Quote, if only the victim could tell what he did to provoke that attack. But he doesn't talk anymore, or do much else. End quote. Even if Jeremy recovered eventually, you can't move without a frontal lobe. That's where the motor cortex is. He wouldn't be able to work for Freddy's again, and I doubt he'd want to either. Fritz Smith, on the other hand, is incredibly suspicious. Fritz Smith is hired late, like Mike Schmidt is. They don't have a replacement for Jeremy on night 5, while Fritz Smith works on night 7 2 days later.
We don't have a replacement for your shift yet, but we're working on it. We're going to try to contact the original restaurant owner. I think the name of the place was Fredbear's Family Diner or something like that.
Fritz Smith was hired up to a day before his shift, right after Ralph contacted the original restaurant owner. Fritz Smith, like Mike Schmidt, appears when they don't have any other candidates and knows how to alter the animatronics' AIs. In fact, Fritz is hired for the exact same reasons as Mike Schmidt. Granted, Mike is also fired for general unprofessionalism, but I think that can easily be explained away by the time period. Mike would be older during FNAF 1, he'd have more time to stop, as I like to put it, drinking the Freddy Faz Kool-Aid. He might have been suspicious of his father, or maybe of the company, or anything that could have developed over time. Character development. In the Ticket to Fun kit, TTF, the name Mike Schmidt is written in the corner of a word search. Mike Afton being a night guard in the FNAF 2 location does make sense. In the movies, Michael Afton works there, or pretends to, but I don't think the difference matters. Mike Schmidt spends a few minutes getting the night guard experience. Not really. If you've played FNAF 2, then you know he goes way too slowly. As I've said earlier, Mike Schmidt and Mike Afton are the same person. TTF only supports this, and that he also worked at the FNAF 2 location. Mike Schmidt references several things only Mike Afton would know: Charlie's death, the missing children, and Midnight Motorist. TTF comes with Jeremy Fitzgerald's check, but Mike can't be Jeremy Fitzgerald. This kit is presumably delivered to a future night guard. Fritz Smith was likely the final night guard to work there, as it closes right after. Mike references a bite in which someone lost their frontal lobe. This probably takes place after Jeremy was bitten. Mike worked at the FNAF 2 location after Jeremy. And I do have an explanation as to why Mike would have Jeremy's check. Something happens at the FNAF 2 location. I understand that's vague, but no one can really agree on what it is that happened, and it doesn't matter for this video. So don't even worry about it.
Okay, so just to update you, there's been somewhat of an investigation. From what I understand, the building is on lockdown. No one is allowed in or out, especially concerning any previous employees. the place was closed down, at least for a while. Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it.
So, we have someone who messed with the animatronics AI, who was hired after they contacted an original owner of Fredbear's Family Diner, and got the job right after an incident happened in which a previous employee seemed to have done something and fled. If William did something during the day shift, which is what this seems to imply with the mention of a previous employee and someone using a yellow suit, then he probably intended to bury the evidence, but he got caught and had to leave. Instead, he hires Mike to clean up the evidence. William makes his kids cover for him in the movies. This isn't out of the question. This is also right after the bite. If Mike was cleaning up whatever it is that happened, he could have stumbled upon the remaining evidence of the bite and cleaned it up. Jeremy worked the day shift immediately after the night shift. Ralph even implies that Jeremy should wear the same uniform. Jeremy probably went straight from the night shift to the day shift, which frankly could explain why he was bit even though he was used to working with the animatronics. His reaction time was low because he was tired. So the check falls out of his pocket or something. Mike finds it, pockets it, and maybe just forgets to return it. Or maybe he just feels too awkward to go to Jeremy's family and explain himself. I feel like this sounds stupid to anyone other than me, but that was what I assumed by default. Mike references the bite in TTF. I think it's more likely he's Fritz and stumbled upon the check just after the bite of 87 happened. Minor detail, also, but one of the crossword clues Mike adds in TTF is our specialty, with the answer being pizza. This just feels like something someone who actually likes the company would say, and while Mike probably changes his mind on Fazbear eventually, he definitely bought into it as a kid. He wore Freddy's merch every day, or maybe he made that Foxy mask himself. I'd still count it. I just feel like Mike Schmidt and Fritz Smith are nepotism hires. Everything lines up a bit too perfectly. And the FNAF 3 guard, also Mike Afton. In Frights, a man named Hudson is the FNAF 3 guard, but Hudson dies on his first night, and he literally spends the whole book projecting his abusive dad onto Springtrap. Or maybe Springtrap is pretending to be his dad, it's not really clear. Springtrap is literally Mike's abusive dad. It makes more sense for Mike to parallel Hudson. The FNAF 3 guard spends an entire week at Fazbear's Fright, the setting of FNAF 3 not to be mistaken with Fazbear Frights. And there is no indication of the protagonist changing during the game like there is in FNAF 2. Mike hallucinates the animatronics from the prior two games, indicating he's familiar with them. The office in the logbook, where Foxy is the night guard, resembles the FNAF 3 office. If Mike is represented by Foxy and the FNAF 3 guard is represented also by Foxy, this could mean Mike is the FNAF 3 guard. It's not entirely definitive since Ralph also references Foxy being his favorite, but it's worth bringing up. In Help Wanted, Helpy represents each FNAF protagonist. His little persona for FNAF 3 is a zombie. Helpy always acts as the player character, so it seems he's implying the player is a zombie. Mike is undead and rotting, so he's basically a zombie. Admittedly, most of the reasoning behind Mike being the FNAF 3 guard is that it makes logical sense in the greater narrative. Mike ends sister location claiming he's going to come find William, and the viewer can see Springtrap emerge in the background. I've always interpreted this as a flash forward to Mike finding his father. Before Pizzeria Simulator was planned, this cutscene was supposed to complete the story. Yes, it does imply that Springtrap survived the FNAF 3 fire, but FNAF 3 itself also implies this. So I don't think the fact that Springtrap survived necessarily means that Pizzeria Simulator was planned from the start. In a Steam update from Scott describing the Golden Freddy update and the cutscene that came with it, that being the one in which Michael monologues about himself and his goals, Scott says, When the final cutscene is ready, I will give very hard mode a little more juice to help dedicated players make it to 6 a.m. Then we can finally see what becomes of Eggs Benedict. Then our story can be complete. This is meant to imply that, despite Sister Location's cliffhanger ending, the cutscene was going to provide an end. This is where Eggs Benedict, Mike Afton, is going to find his father. We hear him promise to do so, and we flash forward to when he finally did. Speaking of finding his father, Springtrap's jump scare is weird. Rather than just jumping at you, he stares, confused. And Springtrap isn't the only one to act strange around the player character. The puppet, Charlie, is in FNAF 3. She just stands in the hall or in the corner of some of the cameras. And she doesn't attack. Presumably this is because she's setting up Happiest Day, which comes to fruition in this game, although it was likely bumped to Pizzeria Simulator when they added more games. Granted, Charlie could be performing several of the steps in advance, so after the fire in Pizzeria Simulator, they could all move on easily. The thing is, the player character is the one playing these minigames. While Charlie puts together the party, most of the minigames have different avatars of various characters. TTF heavily implies that the arcade games are haunted. On a page titled All Work, No Play, quote, "If any of the game cabinets turn on during the course of the night, please immediately shut them down to conserve power. If the game does not power down, even if unplugged, immediately return to your post. Ignore any messages that may appear on the screens. This is a known glitch with no fix. Employees found playing the arcade games while on the clock will immediately be terminated either by us or the animatronics they didn't hear coming." Mangle's Quest, one of the Happiest Day minigames, is a physical arcade game in VIP. To achieve the items you need for Happiest Day, all of which are, interestingly enough, set up in FNAF World, you need to enter or interact with some sort of glitch in the minigames. This implies that we, as the player, are literally playing an arcade game, as opposed to Charlie, like going on physical quests. But the Happiest Day is ultimately something Charlie goes through with. She's letting the player help her and not attacking, despite the fact that she's incredibly hostile in FNAF 2. Whether it's because Mike no longer resembles his father, or they managed to have a conversation, or Charlie gained some awareness during the incredibly long time skip, or she recognizes that Mike isn't covering for his father anymore, Charlie seems to be on decent terms with Mike. We last saw Charlie in 1987, but FNAF 3 takes place 30 years after the closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. It's not stated whether this is the location in which FNAF 1 occurred or the MCI occurred, but when going through the Theory Wiki, the earliest date for the MCI I found was 1979, which would put FNAF 3 in 2009 at the earliest. That's still a reasonable time skip. And I think she'd be more likely to trust someone she knows to help her, tumultuous as their history may be, instead of some random night guard. The logbook, which does reference the FNAF 3 office, also is about Mike and Charlie working together to help Cassidy remember who he is. This would align with them setting up Happiest Day in FNAF 3 as well, considering it is essentially the birthday party Cassidy never got. The FNAF 3 guard is also the first instance we have of an unnamed guard. While we can use alternate continuities to support our conclusions, everything to solve the game should be in the games. Considering FNAF 3 is about the final confrontation, the guard should be someone we already know. The protagonist of the first game, and one of the protagonists in the second game. In my opinion, it just makes the most logical sense for Mike to be the FNAF 3 guard. Mike is also the player character for the night segments of FNAF 4. The most damning evidence is that he draws Nightmare perfectly. Even if he was going off of, for example, Cassidy's description, it wouldn't look this one-to-one. Scott said that none of the Easter eggs in FNAF 4 were random. He says, "I guess most people assumed I filled the game with random Easter eggs this time. I didn't." Scott included the FNAF phone call as ambient noise for a reason. The protagonist has heard the Night 1 phone call in its entirety, something only Mike would have done. The protagonist is a child, which does make it a bit odd because it seems to take place after FNAF 1, but there are a number of explanations for this. The first is that because some of the items in this room seem to be Cassidy's toys, Nightmare Foxy's jump scare seems to mirror that of the Foxy Bully, and there are two variants of Nightmare Fredbear. These dreams could be a product of Mike's guilt. Mike is essentially putting himself in his brother's position. The second option is that Mike, whether naturally or by some experiments, experienced these dreams as a child. If you look at the big bite, you can see that Mike is actually pretty tiny. He's a child at that point. If he experienced the nightmares just after the bite, he'd be about the right height. His experiences in FNAF 1 would likely bring these childhood nightmares back. These are more than nightmares, they're memories. Regardless of the explanation, characters de-aging, so to speak, in dreams isn't all that odd. It happens to multiple characters in the movie, which will be super important later. Just stick with me. What is especially interesting is the way the nightmare animatronics have teeth in their stomachs. This was originally used as evidence that Elizabeth died first and Cassidy witnessed it. This doesn't make sense. Circus Baby's Pizza World and subsequently Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental opened after Freddy's closed.
Due to the massive success, and even more so the unfortunate closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, it was clear that the stage was set, no pun intended, for another contender in children's entertainment.
The Funtime animatronics were also made with child murder, or at the very least, kidnapping in mind. William wouldn't have any reason to experiment like this if no one had died yet. He wouldn't know what remnant is and wouldn't try to go about acquiring it. It's also worth noting that William kept renting out the Funtime animatronics. They were still active. He wouldn't need to go out and kill kids himself if he had robots to do that for him. The stomach teeth aren't about a claw in the animatronics' chests. They're about having a mouth and teeth at eye level. The dreamer is afraid of being bitten, likely because they've seen someone get bit before. Elements of FNAF 4 mirror its predecessors. There are animatronics from the previous games and mirroring gameplay elements like the two doors and flashlight. This person has experienced the previous games and seen the big bite. Mike Schmidt is pretty heavily associated with dreams in the first movie, and Vanessa Shelley dreams of herself as a child in a warped version of the Afton household. Both of these dreams seem to have an element of guilt, Vanessa for leaving her family and Mike Schmidt for failing to save his brother. Granted, I imagine the fact that Mike drew Nightmare is probably the biggest piece of evidence. If he wasn't the player in the night segments of FNAF 4, he wouldn't have drawn Nightmare. The main source of ambiguity is what the nightmares are. There is only one thing important for the sake of this video to acknowledge about the origins of the nightmare animatronics. It doesn't matter whether they are guilt, ghosts, nightmare gas, or illusion discs, but from TOYSNHK's perspective, William is at fault for them. Nightmare Freddy says he was remade, but not by you, indicating that TOYSNHK blames the player, William, for the nightmare's creation. I'm not going to place FNAF 4 in the timeline, by the way. If I don't have to, I'm not going to, but I want to establish the concept of the game. Next up, we've got the player of FNAF World. FNAF World is a video game. I've said this earlier, so I don't feel the need to establish it again. It's a haunted video game, but a video game nonetheless. I don't think the player is physically in the game. Everything that happens out there has an effect here. When the player starts the game, they are told that things that happen here, FNAF world, are a result of what happens out there, the real world. The player's actions in the outside world influence FNAF world. They are playing a game that manipulates the universe inside the arcade machine. The events of FNAF World primarily exist to set up the Happiest Day minigames. The minigames that Mike then goes on to play so Charlie can finally help the children move on. FNAF World is the final piece of the puzzle. Alongside Charlie, Mike helps his brother remember and then gathers everything Charlie needs to celebrate Happiest Day. Why wouldn't he be the one to gather the pieces too? FNAF World seems to be related to Cassidy's memories. The map, according to some at least, seems to resemble a brain with the only part covered in snow, dead, being the equivalent to the frontal lobe. Recovering memories seems to be a part of helping the spirits move on, likely why Charlie was trying to communicate with Cassidy in the logbook. An 8-bit Fredbear, often referred to as Glitch Bear, tells the player they need to leave breadcrumbs for him. Oddly enough, the yellow eyes say the pieces are in place for you at the end. This leads me to believe that the breadcrumbs are Cassidy's memories, while the pieces are the now set up elements of Happiest Day. We are still your friends. Do you still believe that? Despite the similarities between this and the dialogue in FNAF 4, I don't believe Cassidy is the FNAF World player. Whether or not the eyes belong to Glitch Bear, these phrases seem entirely different. The player leaves breadcrumbs for an ambiguous him, but then are told that the pieces are in place for them. While the player is leaving something for someone else, Cassidy, the player is also setting up something for themselves, the next steps to get to the Happiest Day. Glitch Bear says, "This is a safe place, a sanctuary. The truth is that there is no safe place. You don't understand that. You were made for one thing." What's interesting to me is that, despite this being from the clock ending, the ending where you set up Happiest Day, Glitch Bear never says what that one thing is, just that it's connected to the concept of a safe place. Interestingly enough, this isn't the only instance we've seen of someone who considers themselves someone only meant to do one thing.
There is only one thing left for me to do now.
Mike doesn't need to understand how the spirits work and how to free them. He needs to stop William, but until he gets there, Glitch Bear can guide him along the right path. They say, follow the trail that they have created for you. The player is someone with a path already set up for them, someone with only one thing to do. Glitch Bear doesn't want them to stray from this path. If anything, Glitch Bear thinks it's best they stay on this path. Because who doesn't want William Afton dead, right? Beyond this being a part of Happiest Day, something Mike is consistently involved in setting up, Glitch Bear implies that the player is meant for one thing that they need to focus on alongside Glitch Bear's orders. Mike needs to focus on stopping William. He can just also help out with Happiest Day in the meantime. This would likely make Glitch Bear Charlie, considering she's been involved alongside Mike in the process of setting up Happiest Day and helping Cassidy remember. Charlie isn't usually represented with Fredbear, but Glitch Bear is only Fredbear because it's a glitch version of Adventure Fredbear. I can't say for sure, nor does it really matter in this case. Hopefully that makes sense. FNAF World in general doesn't make sense. Luckily, it's followed by Sister Location, which is actually pretty straightforward. And we know that Mike is the protagonist because he introduces himself. Very polite of him. Easy enough, let's go on to the franchisee and pizzeria simulator. Several of the animatronics imply they know who the franchisee is.
Together again!
That was easier than I thought it would be.
Scrap Trap's line is a bit less obvious than Molten Freddy's, but he does seem to imply that he understands the player's abilities enough to expect better of them.
You may not recognize me at first, but I assure you, that's still me.
This implies that the player should recognize William eventually. He looks nothing like he used to, I assume, as a human, but he does resemble Springtrap enough that you'd be able to catch the resemblance eventually. That is, of course, if the franchisee has seen Springtrap.
Bittersweet, but fitting.
This is a death line. William has never really been shown to be remorseful over what he does. Referring to the player's death as bittersweet implies that he has a close connection with them. Similarly, his remark that this is fitting implies that this is someone he should kill. Maybe for poetic reasons, considering the way he seems to be trying to sound deep throughout this game. It seems like Henry knows the player too, even if he didn't at first.
And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you. Although there was a way out planned for you, I have a feeling that's not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be.
Henry is far from a reliable narrator, but everyone in this building is about to die. He has no reason to act like he knows who this is, and that he knows this job wasn't intended for them, but he still goes on to talk about it. If he was lying about anything, it was the exit, but that doesn't really matter. I doubt the franchisee would leave either way. Like in FNAF 3, the night guard is never given a name, but with this familiarity, combined with the fact that the franchisee should be someone we've met before, a previous night guard. Let's take a look at some of the songs in Pizzeria Simulator, specifically their titles. The ones I want to draw your attention to are A Slice and a Scoop and No Time for Popcorn. The slice is probably pizza, but the scoop? I don't think they serve ice cream at Pizzeria Simulator. This is a reference to the scooper. Similarly, No Time for Popcorn is probably a reference to the interludes in between nights in Sister Location. Once again, the player is Mike, someone associated with Sister Location who would have met all these animatronics. Once again, from a narrative perspective, Mike did say the one thing he had left to do was find his father. Assuming he goes to Fazbear's Fright before they find Springtrap on night 2, he's likely just investigating all Fazbear-related establishments. This is no exception. Mike has been the protagonist of every game, admittedly not for very long in FNAF 2 as Jeremy worked there longer. He's the series through line. Throughout the games, people come and go. Mike stays. But let's establish a quick order of events before we continue. We know FNAF 2 takes place before FNAF 1. Ralph mentions the Bite of 87 in both the game and the week before, indicating they take place after 1987, which is when FNAF 2 takes place. FNAF 2 also ends by teasing an opening with the original characters. This wording implies that the toy animatronics, the main stars of the FNAF 2 restaurant, are not the originals, and therefore the FNAF 1 animatronics must be. Sister Location must take place after FNAF 1. A small reason is that the technology is just way too advanced for the mid-1980s, but let's shove that logic aside for a second. Let's talk about Molten MCI, or the theory that all the endoskeletons of the original animatronics were melted down and injected into the fun times. This is essentially what happens in the novels. This doesn't necessarily have to include Golden Freddy for reasons I'll get into, but that's less important for the purpose of this theory.
As if what he had already done wasn't enough. He found a new way to desecrate, to humiliate, to destroy.
Here, Henry is referring to an event that happens after the MCI, assuming that's what William had already done. The missing children don't seem to remember what William looks like in FNAF 1 and 2, or FNAF 2 at the very least.
But the characters have been acting very unusual, almost aggressive toward the staff. They interact with the kids just fine, but when they encounter an adult, they just stare.
This hostility seems specifically targeted against the staff and all adults to a lesser extent. Jeremy Fitzgerald seems to have no connection to William Afton, and he's still attacked. The animatronics seem to recognize their killer as an employee and an adult. This means the animatronics likely encountered William in between FNAF 2 and Sister Location, assuming we're working with the same spirits throughout the series.
They thought I was you.
They seem to know what William looks like, but not well enough. This confusion could be attributed to the spirits getting mixed together, assuming William didn't separate them by spirit when he melted them down. A similar event occurs in the novels, in which the spirits struggle to recover their memories after being melted down. This isn't the only instance we see of references to multiple entities getting combined. It would take a really long time to play all of Candy Cadet's stories, so let me summarize them. I'll put the text on the screen. A woman with 5 keys is trapped in a locked room. She could leave her room with 1 key, but each key led to a child's room. She could only save 1 child. Unable to choose, the woman melted the keys together. It didn't work, and all the children were trapped. A man adopts 5 orphans. A burglar breaks in and kills them all. The man can only afford 1 coffin, so he stitches all 5 bodies together and buries it. Someone knocks on his door. A little boy has a snake. He finds 5 kittens and keeps them in a shoebox. The boy knew he could give up 1 kitten to feed his snake, or give up the snake, but he couldn't do either. Each night, the snake ate 1 kitten. After 5 nights, the boy cut the snake open and pieced the bodies back together. Molten Freddy, a combination of the Funtime animatronics, even seems to reference the second story.
Knock, knock! I'm here!
If we assume the 5 entities repeatedly referenced throughout these stories are not the original animatronics, and instead the spirits, Golden Freddy doesn't necessarily have to be included. Elizabeth does, after all, briefly merge with the other spirits when they form Ennard. It's not super relevant, but the biggest piece for Molten MCI, in my opinion, only shows 4 endoskeletons. In Help Wanted, there is a mini-game called Vent Repair, in which the player, in Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals, has to fix various elements of the vents while evading animatronics. In the Ennard level, the player will enter a boiler room. The player sets fire to Ennard, but in hard mode, Ennard breaks out. Inside the furnace, there are 4 Endo-01 endoskeletons, or the endoskeletons of the FNAF 1 animatronics. The specific inclusion of this scene in Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals in the same furnace Ennard burns in leads me to the conclusion that at least 4 of the classic animatronics endoskeletons were melted down to power the fun times. William's return and eventual spring locking likely happened sometime during Sister Location. Maybe he was after Golden Freddy and the 5th endoskeleton. Maybe he was searching for any remaining parts. The main issue with Molten MCI is that, if it occurred during the Follow Me minigames, there shouldn't be 5 ghosts at the end. If we assume the main ghost, the one the player controls, is Charlie, then her spirit is still present. The others are a bit more difficult. Granted, I don't think Molten MCI was the plan the whole time. FNAF 4 was the original final chapter, and Sister Location was created due to popular demand for a more lore-focused game. I do want to avoid the "it was a retcon" argument as much as possible, because, unless I have solid proof the plans have changed, I would rather not assume authorial intent. That being said, I don't think it's impossible for Charlie to conjure the other spirits, or for their presence to linger in the building. After all, hauntings seem just as related to memory as they are to spirits. From the Silver Eyes, quote, "Old houses, Sometimes, places where you walk in and you feel sad or nostalgic, even though you've never been there before. End quote. And from Ticket to Fun, quote, if any of the game cabinets turn on during the course of the night, please shut them down to conserve power. If the game does not power down, even if unplugged, immediately return to your post. End quote. The existence of haunted arcade games imply that spirits may not necessarily be confined to their animatronics. It also seems like William doesn't remove the animatronic shells, which the spirits could be inhabiting, at least partially. As such, there are several explanations for Follow Me that remain compliant with Molten MCI. Assuming Molten MCI, that puts Sister Location after FNAF 1. FNAF 3 is after Sister Location. As I referenced earlier, Scott stated that the fate of the Sister Location protagonist was revealed in the final cutscene. The cutscene depicts the end of FNAF 3. Sister Location was meant to be the final game, but it doesn't depict the spirits being freed or William being defeated like FNAF 3 does. Additionally, Mike references going to the bunker just like William asked him to. William Afton would have to be alive to give him this order. We've established that Mike was the guard in FNAF 3. If Mike found his father in Springtrap, he'd have little reason to vow to find him at the end of Sister Location like he does. If Mike has already found and tried to kill him, why would he blindly listen to his orders? FNAF 3 also takes place 30 years after Freddy's closes, although the specific location isn't specified. Hand Unit suggests Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental was founded due to the massive success and even more unfortunate closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This, in my opinion, implies that Sister Location takes place much closer to the closing of Freddy's, probably the FNAF 1 location considering it would take place shortly after, instead of 30 years. FNAF 3 could have taken place in a range of years, but all are after the rough FNAF 1 date of somewhere in the 90s. According to the Theory Wiki, the earliest theorized date for the MCI is 1979. This would place FNAF 3 in 2009 at the very earliest. If we assume the location closed in the same year and, for example, not the following one. Personally, I feel like the MCI was several years after, but that's not super important. Sister Location seems closer to FNAF 1 than FNAF 3, so I suspect Sister Location happened first. FNAF World seems to occur just before or in tandem with FNAF 3. While it doesn't seem like the spirits move on until Pizzeria Simulator, it is likely that Happiest Day was still set up in FNAF 3, since the process seems to be related to the FNAF 3 arcade games. Similarly, FNAF World probably happened just before or at the same time. Either Mike set up all of the Happiest Day minigames before performing them, or he just set up each minigame individually before performing its Happiest Day counterpart. It doesn't really matter, it's just worth noting that these games occur at around the same time. Pizzeria Simulator is last, that's the entire point of the game, and all the animatronics are ruined from the previous 5 games. Also, Mike dies in Pizzeria Simulator. He needs to be alive or undead at least for every other game. FNAF 4's placement in the timeline doesn't matter for this, so don't worry about it, just don't. This gives us the following order: FNAF 2, FNAF 1, Sister Location, FNAF 3, and FNAF World at the same time, and then finally, Pizzeria Simulator. Now that we have the who and when, let's get into the what and why. Part 8, MikeAccomplice. An issue I've noticed with Scott Cawthon's writing is his struggle with character motivation, specifically giving his characters a reason why they are motivated by something and what they are motivated to do. That is to say, some characters have clear goals with no reason behind them, while others have no clear goals but strong intentions. That being said, I think a good theory incorporates motivation, both the what and why, because it helps create a cohesive narrative. Bad writing aside, this is meant to be a story, and I want to treat it like one. The next few sections will focus on character motivation, or what the overlying narrative of each game is. This isn't a long section since it's referenced throughout the previous section, but that one was getting so long that I decided to save the elaboration for this one. I've brought this up in passing throughout the video, but MikeAccomplice is very important to this theory. Mike gets his job fast in FNAF 1 and 2. He tampers with the animatronics in both games. Notably, in FNAF 2, he appears the night before the restaurant presumably closes, right after some sort of incident happens, an incident William never gets in trouble for. Mike acting suspicious doesn't necessarily mean he's working for William, but the fact that he gets the job so quickly, one of the instances being after Ralph contacts the original owner of Fredbear's Family Diner, does imply that William got Mike the job.
You had one job. One! Keep him in the dark and kill him if he got too close.
William seems to let the animatronics do most of the work in the movies, but Vanessa is clearly his failsafe. We don't know exactly what she's done for William, but she helped him until the end of the first movie. William works as a night guard in the novels, but once Elizabeth is freed, he starts sending her out on various tasks. In the movies, he works as a career counselor, but it seems like Vanessa does more of the hands-on work at the pizzerias.
Well, Freddy's is on my beat. I like to stay well informed.
We have never seen an Afton child make it to adulthood, or become an adult android in one specific case, without being manipulated into helping William. Every game preceding FNAF 3 and FNAF World do not involve freeing the spirits or stopping William Afton, the two things that are, in essence, the whole point of the story. What Mike is doing probably varies from game to game. Between the Bite of 87 and whatever happened during FNAF 2, it's likely Mike was there to clean up after William, and possibly bury the evidence. He may have just been a worker in FNAF 1, solely because William needed a worker and I doubt people were lining up to be night guards at Freddy's. Either way, Mike listened. His turning point is in the sister location.
I put her back together, just like you asked me to.
Mike begins the game with the express purpose of listening to William, until he gets scooped, falling for a trap that his father led him into. After all, they must have displayed some aggression towards William in the past, enough for them to immediately leap into the plan of turning him into a skin suit. William, after all, didn't go to help his own daughter. He made Mike do it.
There is only one thing left for me to do now. I'm going to come find you.
This is Mike's turning point. This is when he decides that, instead of helping his father, he's going to do whatever it takes to kill him. William killed Mike. He told him to go deep underground with the promise of putting his sister back together. He knew that Mike would be desperate to listen, and he knew the animatronics would be aggressive. It doesn't matter that he wasn't manning the scooper. William killed all of his kids, even if he didn't do it with his own two hands.
She's free now.
Mike doesn't mention anything about what specifically happened to him, nor does he place any of the blame on his sister. The only accusations in his monologue are sent to William. After all, if Mike was William's accomplice, he'd have no reason to think William would let him die. William is the one putting their family back together, after all.
I don't need you anymore.
The word anymore ultimately implies that Vanessa needed her father once. She's developed a level of codependency that Mike seems to mirror, both reluctantly obeying until William betrays them. If you'll recall, in the staff bot Afton family, Mike is represented with a server bot.
and help me clean up the mess that you created!
William shifts the blame onto Vanessa, either for the current predicament with Mike Schmidt or some ambiguous event that occurred in the past. By shifting the blame onto her, she has an incentive to listen. After all, she started this. William is just helping her clean it up. Mike kicked everything off with the big bite. William just needs his help to put Cassidy back together. If Mike was really sorry, he'd help. MikeBro, in my opinion, makes MikeAccomplice all the more likely. Through Cassidy's plush, William seems hostile with Mike, claiming that Mike hates Cassidy, but he also seems to encourage Cassidy to go through the bullying. The only way out is through. The bullying doesn't paint Mike as someone overtly rebellious, no more so than the average mean middle schooler, especially not if William never discouraged or even encouraged his behavior. Mike, as the older brother, has a reason for assisting his father. He directly quotes William when discussing the concept of putting someone back together. As the only living Afton child who felt responsible for the death of at least one of his siblings, Mike could be swayed into helping fix the Afton family. But something must have changed. William kills Mike, and when Mike rises from the dead, he hunts William down in FNAF 3 and Pizzeria Simulator. You don't have to go through any of the animatronics rooms to reach Circus Baby. If this was about Elizabeth, William could have helped her himself, unless he was afraid of Elizabeth's aggression too. I don't think this was because William cared more about Elizabeth than Mike. Maybe getting Elizabeth back was one of the benefits, and maybe William figured Mike would get back up. This would imply that he figured Mike would be scooped rather than any other death, so I think that's a little less likely. Remember how Mike Schmidt gets fired for general unprofessionalism? William doesn't seem to try to kill his own kids without reason, despite his recklessness when letting them hang out around killer robots. You can't tell a little girl that you made a robot just for her, and under no circumstances should she go see that robot. She's gonna go see that robot. The exception is when he stabs Vanessa for helping Mike Schmidt. Vanessa, at least in his eyes, betrays him. The addition of general unprofessionalism in FNAF 1 is interesting, if solely because its prequel doesn't cite this. Something changed. Did Mike look into something he shouldn't have? Did he try to help the kids? Did he just stop trying to suck up to Fazbear Entertainment? Either way, William decided that Mike's loyalty wasn't enough. He sent him on one final task, one he was never supposed to come back from. In Pizzeria Simulator, William can call Mike's death bittersweet but fitting. William isn't necessarily eager to kill Mike. It's still bittersweet. Mike was William's loyal accomplice after all. But it's still fitting, because in William's eyes, Mike still did something wrong, and tried to kill William in FNAF 3 if we assume he set that fire and it wasn't just faulty wiring. After he dies, Mike claims that finding William is the one thing left for him to do. I don't think that's true. He could give up and die for real. He could try to appear as a normal person and live again. He could stay out of things and become a hermit, which is Henry's go-to. To Mike, though, there is only one thing left to do. He served William for about a decade, and William is his father. He raised Mike, made him into the person he is. Mike can't get back any of that time because he's dead. He grew up with a life revolving around William. Who's to say his death won't revolve around him, too? Part 9, in which I bring in Cellular Division and Infantilization. This title isn't a joke. Well, I mean, it kind of is, but also I'm being very serious. Don't laugh. Don't. I have about 100 subscribers as of making this, so I don't really have channel regulars, but I'm sure some people know what I'm about to talk about because I've made a whole video on it. But there are 2 things I need to prove. 1. Mike is as codependent on his father as I said he was, and Mike can still be TOYSNHK despite the fact that TOYSNHK is a child. I have addressed this in a video before, but I didn't outright say why I think that works, and I think that kind of went over a lot of people's heads, so I'm going to try to be more direct about it. It is a bad sign when your fandom starts talking about cellular division, but they keep doing it, so here we are. The cellular division thing is sort of a fandom in-joke about decomposite characters. The FNAF movies seem to slowly be breaking Mike Afton down into as many characters as possible, because he's just got too much going on at too many periods of time, I guess. Most people assume that his movie counterparts are Michael Afton, I'm sorry, I'm going to try and make this as clear as possible, and Mike Schmidt. Small, translation guide? That's not the right term, but I don't know what is. I'm going to full name Mike Schmidt. Movie Michael Afton is going to be referred to as Michael, and I'm just going to call his game counterpart Mike. Sorry if that's confusing. Personally, I think people focus too much on gender when it comes to narrative parallels, because Vanessa Shelley is very much a Mike Afton parallel. Before I get into why this is relevant, but as the title implies it has to do with infantilization, let me make a quick distribution chart to prove my point. Once again, if you're a channel regular, this is different from the other charts, I promise. Same theme, but it's different. Green indicates a shared trait. Yellow indicates that I don't have enough information to confirm. I'm hopefully going to be able to draw some version that can fit on the screen, because right now it's just a Google Doc that takes up 3 pages. Now, this section serves a few purposes. To start, it's a setup for some serious character studying we're going to do in a few sections. But it's also going to address something you've probably been thinking of already. TOYSNHK is a child. Mike was probably in his 20s when he died, give or take. The FNAF movie, to an extent, taught us what we already knew. William treats his children like property.
You will always be mine.
You are his child. You have a purpose.
The movie is pretty overt and unsubtle about it, and it seems to mirror the dehumanizing way William continuously references putting his children back together, something he both says to Cassidy and asks Mike to do to Elizabeth. He's not reviving them or helping them or saving them. He says Cassidy is broken. He describes him like a toy or an animatronic. Being a child is a dehumanizing experience, especially when you don't have good parents. I'm going to assume everyone reading this is a child or has been a child once. You can't vote, you can't drive, you're not in charge of most of your decisions, no one respects you, and no one bothers to understand your outbursts. Obviously, your experience as a child depends on your parents, but the fact that parents have ultimate control over their children's lives can feel incredibly dehumanizing. I promise I'm going somewhere with this. William Afton's methods of dehumanization do include reducing his children to broken creations or possessions, but he also infantilizes them to an extent where they seem to have internalized it.
You are my child. You have a purpose.
When William calls Vanessa his child, she literally turns into one. As an adult, Vanessa was able to stand up to William, But as a child, she had no power. All she could do was listen and serve her purpose, a purpose determined for her by her father. We only see Vanessa as a child briefly, but the moment I want to draw attention to is when she tries to stop Charlie from going into the back. Specifically because she doesn't go after Charlie. Vanessa seems terrified, and she puts herself on the line to so much as warn Charlie. She clearly cares about her a lot, but she doesn't follow her. In comparison, Vanessa tells Mike in the first movie that she can't go with him to save Abby because she's useless against her father. Still, she ends up going after him anyway. As an adult, she's able to build a support network with another adult, Mike Schmidt, that allows her to escape. As a child, all she has is another kid who no one else listens to. The way Vanessa turns into a child in her dream when William demeans her isn't a unique incident. As adults, Michael and Vanessa seem to speak more childishly when particularly threatened by their father, dead or alive.
The man who took them, he was a very bad man. Very cruel man. Also a very clever man.
Vanessa struggles to find her words, and the ones she does find are repetitive and vague. She tends to use big words outside of specific moments like this when she's forced to directly address her father's influence. I'm going to show you my favorite line in the second movie, if only because it's very unserious.
Half of this town will be dead by morning.
Half this town will not be dead by morning. Michael says this incredibly confidently, despite the fact that it is in no way true. All of the animatronics are currently at Mike Schmidt's house, not at FazFest. It's the middle of the night. No one has died yet. Charlie is a slow killer, going to each house one at a time and monologuing to each victim first. Granite Falls, where the FNAF movies take place, had about 3,000 people in the year 2000. The movie takes place in 2002. This means that half the town, very specific metric by the way, is about 1,500 people. Vanessa catches how absurd this is.
This isn't a game.
Because he is treating it like one. Michael has no clear end goal, just a general ballpark to kill as many people as possible. It's thoughtless. It's childish. Vanessa, Mike Schmidt, and Michael have never moved on from their childhoods. Throughout the second movie, Vanessa tries to shed her father's influence. But even though he's dead, she sees him everywhere. She tries to confront the past in her dreams, but William still gets the final words, claiming Vanessa will always be his. In addition to this and the fact that she returns to her child self, Vanessa only stops William when she's in her police officer uniform. While it isn't confirmed, it seems like Vanessa became a cop for William. Freddy's is on her route, and she stops by regularly while William is still giving her orders. She's only able to stand up to William as a past incarnation of herself crafted by her father. Vanessa doesn't move on in this dream. She stands up to her father, but she doesn't grow out of the person she used to be. This character regression is even more apparent when the movie ends.
You can have a normal life. We could have a normal life.
Despite her declaration, Vanessa's support system, the man who helped her escape, leaves her. Mike Schmidt was her only connection to normalcy, and he doesn't trust her anymore. Instead, Vanessa is possessed by someone from her past. Charlie never grew up or moved on from Freddy's. She had no choice, after all. Now that she's possessed by her, Vanessa is tied to her childhood and to Freddy's, no matter how hard she tried to leave it behind. Mike Schmidt isn't any different. He isn't normal, no matter how much he thinks he is. He spent 15 years dealing with his missing brother by literally reliving the past. Mike Schmidt struggles so much to move on to create a new life with his sister that he nearly sacrifices her so he can have his old life back in the first movie. Something that went unaddressed, by the way. Scott Cawthon may have forgotten, but I remember. While he actively chases the past over and over again in the first movie, Mike Schmidt tries to return to normalcy in the second one. This ultimately doesn't matter. By virtue of being the main character, Mike Schmidt has to put up with whatever the narrative throws at him. Mike Schmidt abandons Vanessa at the end of the second movie, but he's still the protagonist. One way or another, he's going to end up in Fazbear's Fright in the third movie. Ever since his brother disappeared over a decade ago, Mike Schmidt has been trapped within the narrative, drawn to the past, to Freddy's, and to William Afton. While he doesn't literally age down like his two counterparts do, Michael doesn't act like any time has passed since William died.
But I'm here to continue his legacy. Just in time for FazFest.
Michael isn't particularly adept at murder. The kill count of this movie is fairly low, and all of the kills are attributed to Charlie. Also, this is the face Michael makes when he sees someone die. He doesn't like this. He doesn't want to do this. If he did, he'd have a real plan instead of treating things like a game and offering vague approximations of a real plot. I doubt Michael knows that William is still around. He seems genuinely stunned when Mike Schmidt tells him that William is dead, before he eventually agrees. He doesn't have to do this, whatever it is he's trying to do. He just doesn't know how to do anything other than what he thinks his father would want him to do. Like Mike Schmidt and Vanessa, he has yet to break away from the influence William had on his life. In the games, after William kills Mike, Mike doesn't move past him. Instead, he dedicates his afterlife to taking William down. Unlike any of his movie parallels, Mike doesn't have any living siblings. It's always been him and William Afton. In FNAF 4, the gameplay sections, which seems to take place after FNAF 1, Mike dreams of himself as a child. Because Mike is still stuck on the day his life changed, the scene we see in the same game with these nightmares. If the movies teach us anything about Mike Afton, it's that all he knows how to do is relive the past. Mike traps himself with William Afton and with Freddy's in a way that makes all of his movie counterparts regress into past versions of themselves. Mike is no exception, because he's trapped in the past too. Trapped as a child. Trapped as the same boy who accidentally killed his brother, and now he must suffer the consequences. Part 10. What's the point of Purgatory? UCN is not just about getting revenge on William.
This is how it feels, and you get to experience it over and over and over again, forever.
What exactly is William experiencing? There are several offices he's trapped in that resemble the settings of FNAF 1, FNAF 3, FNAF 4, and Sister Location, albeit altered to give them the same gameplay, considering all of these games had slightly different mechanics. There are animatronics from every game. Only one person has been around to experience everything, a person who would have William to blame for all of it. Mike went to every location because of William, whether to help him or to stop him. Mike finally has the chance to inflict that same torment upon his father. If TOYSNHK was, for example, one of the missing children, why wouldn't they just force William to experience what they did, dying and then getting stuffed into a suit? TOYSNHK is sharing how it feels, and judging by the gameplay, it is being a night guard. It is fighting off animatronics night after night, while all you can do is endure. You'll never escape. You'll keep coming back for years and years because you don't know how to do anything else.
What is this new prison? Is it me trapped, or is it you? Perhaps it's us.
UCN isn't a good thing. I don't know if I need to say that, so I'm just going to. It's TOYSNHK's method of torturing himself. He's keeping himself in a prison with William, because that's all he's done his entire life. Mike is forcing William to experience what it was like for him to survive animatronics with no ability to fight back, but Mike is reliving it too, even if he isn't in the office. As I described in a previous section, Mike is permanently stuck in the past, not just when he was a child, but specifically when he was under William's control. Mike's life and death have revolved around William for so long, and with UCN, Mike never has to learn how to do anything else. I think an incredibly overlooked part of UCN is that whoever TOYSNHK is, he is willingly choosing to spend his afterlife with the man who killed him.
I have always been hiding in your shadow.
We really haven't seen many instances of characters who feel William's accomplishments eclipse their own, which is what this line implies TOYSNHK feels. If anything, we've seen things the other way around with William's jealousy of Henry in the novels. That being said, Mike does refer to himself as having been living in shadows in Sister Location, and has been compared to William, at least physically, when the Funtime animatronics mistook Mike for William. Mike has always been in William's shadow, and now, trapping William in a place like this, he never has to leave it. Mike paints himself as lesser than William, as in William's shadow, despite the fact that he controls William's fate.
When I'm here, you play by my rules.
There are a lot of voice lines, such as this one from Music Man, that imply that TOYSNHK considers this a reversal of fortunes. TOYSNHK, Mike, played by William's roles for years, and now William has to play by his. I think Mike's attempts to use UCN to avoid moving past his life with his father and exert control over William are most apparent in the character of Rockstar Foxy. For those of you who don't know, Rockstar Foxy is the only animatronic that can help the player, although several are unable to kill you. Rockstar Foxy cannot be deactivated. Even when his AI level is set to 0, he can still appear. His parrot will fly through the office. If you click on it, he'll either offer to help you or attack you.
Yarg, you play with fire and sometimes you get burned.
Mike is generally associated with fire, presumably being responsible for the one in FNAF 3 and assisting Henry in the pizzeria simulator fire. This is vaguely referenced in the FNAF 2 movie, when Michael says he added fuel to the fire around FazFest. This line also references that Rockstar Foxy can help the player. Sometimes you get burned, but not always.
Yarg, how may I be of service to ya?
Rockstar Foxy switches between violence and subservience at random, although the odds depend on his AI level. On one hand, this could be a reflection of Mike's relationship with William. Despite his desire to hurt William to make him feel how Mike did, he still wants to help the man that raised him. UCN exists because Mike is attached to William, for better or worse. Mostly worse. On the other hand, this could be a reflection of how William treated Mike.
Don't you know that I love you? Don't you know that I care about you?
Affection from William seems to be sporadic and unpredictable. William ultimately had all the control because Mike had no idea what version, for lack of a better term, of William he would receive on a given day. Mike died because he trusted William. Rockstar Foxy is really easy to trust. When his AI level is low, it's usually worth clicking on the parrot and reaping the rewards. Eventually, though, you run out of luck. Eventually, the one you trusted kills you. UCN's main menu theme is Sizoptrophobia. I should probably look up a pronunciation guide for that, but I won't. Or the fear of mirrors or reflections. Mike is doing the one thing he's always done, but always feared. reflecting his father. And for once, William has to confront that reflection. Mike has never been anyone other than William Afton's son. He was William's accomplice, he died, and then the one thing he had left to do was track William down and kill him. Mike hasn't done anything outside of his father's legacy, and that isn't going to change. After all, Henry was the one to set the pizzeria simulator fire. Mike still needs that last laugh. But this isn't a happy ending. And a lot of the complaints I've seen for this theory are that Mike never gets to rest. The story feels incomplete. The thing is, this isn't the end. Part 11. Those weird cutscenes. I bet you thought I forgot about the cutscenes. They are very important, but more so to the end of UCN than the beginning. In fact, let's work backwards. When you beat 50/20 mode, setting all the animatronics AI to the highest possible level, you get a cutscene of a twitching golden Freddy disappearing into the dark. His movements are nearly identical to Springtrap's in the FNAF 3 trailer, with the main difference being a zoom in or zoom out. This was originally a Google Doc, which means I also have a book quote since that was hard to show in writing, so I'll put it here too. In the short story, The New Kid, a boy named Devin witnesses a spring locking. The suit started jerking in a spastic, horrific dance. It looked like a moth-eaten, mildew-blotched gold bear was convulsing. I don't think Golden Freddy's twitches are a sign of rage, not when we've seen something near identical to this in multiple instances related to a spring-lock failure. I can't say for sure whether Cassidy was spring-locked on purpose or not. William could have stuffed him solely to attempt to transfer his spirit into the suit like he'd done with the previous children. Maybe he thought he had to kill Cassidy to do it and set the spring locks off on purpose. The reason doesn't particularly matter, he still did it. But if Mike is TOYSNHK and not Cassidy, why would he be showing this? Let's rewind. Let's go back to the start. There are several cutscenes you can get as you gain more points in UCN, and these form 2 full anime-inspired short stories. Toy Chica, The High School Years, which I will be calling TCTHSY, has been analyzed to hell and back. Each day, Chica gushes over a cute boy, plotting how she'll win him over in an exceedingly gruesome way. Each day, she has a trophy from the previous boy, beginning with a hook in her bag, presumably from Foxy.
I told him that someone ran over his dog in front of my house. But once he's there, I'll entice him with warm cookies, lure him inside, invite him inside, and then I'll have him.
The general fandom consensus around these cutscenes is that they're about William Afton's attempts to lure and kill his victims. Something odd I've noticed is that people tend to take the descriptions in this cutscene literally, when they take the other cutscenes figuratively. TCTHSY is not literally how William targeted his victims. Most of these animatronics aren't associated with any victims, Pigpatch and the Twisted Wolf, and the descriptions don't mirror any of the details we've heard of. Susie knows her dog is dead. William tells her that he isn't. The opposite occurs in the clip I just played. Toy Chica tells the wolf his dog got run over. The wolf is also the third victim, while Susie is pretty damn clear about being the first in this exact same game.
I'll just wait for him after school, throw a bag over his head, hit him with a shovel, and drag him into the back of my car.
This doesn't seem to mirror any of the murders we've seen in the games. TCTHSY has 7 victims. 5 missing children, Charlie, and if I had to guess, Elizabeth or Mike. No one's death lines up with this. If this was hinting at a secret additional victim, We should have received some indication of who they were elsewhere in the games. I don't even think this cutscene needs to reference TOYSNHK. TOYSNHK having the most brutal death is a weak reason for them to be the one in particular William shouldn't have killed. This isn't about how nicely he killed his victims. Instead, I think the reason the descriptions grow more and more detailed is to show escalation. William grew more and more brutal with time, and as he got bolder, his victims suffered the consequences. What strikes me about TCTHSY is how low the stakes are. We're shown a cutesy anime girl gushing about her crushes. While the dialogue can get mildly disturbing, Chica's voice remains light and the imagery never falters, save for her little backpack of trophies. There's nothing wrong with a lighthearted interlude, but the fact that the other cutscenes are given extremely high stakes is interesting to me. Bear of Vengeance, or BOV, has had a lot of interpretations over the years. Funnily enough, I have yet to see an interpretation that doesn't have Elizabeth as the mangle, and I think that's cute. BOV tells the story of the bear, who continuously attempts to attack the fox with various tricks. Putting fish in his laundry, waiting until his favorite show is on, etc. Only to fail each time. The bear is given some sort of silly punishment, like keeping a frog, wearing a fruit hat, or doing chores. He swears revenge, but the fox always anticipates his attack. The mangle is also there. The bear says the air is ripe for revenge, and the blood on the fox's hands will finally be scrubbed off with the scoring pad of justice. Despite the dramatic language throughout these cutscenes, nothing bad ever happens. After one of his defeats, the bear says, "I was captured and set free on one condition. I must make the fox breakfast for the next 7 days." There has only been one character consistently associated with Foxy, and that's Mike. And while wearing a Foxy mask, he happened to bully someone associated with bears, Cassidy. If Elizabeth really is the mangle, considering she has a broken mangle toy in her room, then it could make sense that the other leads are her brothers, the bear and the fox. This would explain why all of the bear's plots aren't nearly as dramatic as they seem. "Tonight, I will take my flute and put the fox to sleep before my attack," the bear says when plotting one of his ideas. These read more like pranks than attacks. Well, once again, not meant to be taken literally, this seems to be an insight on Mike and Cassidy's relationship. One of mutual antagonism, but with a sense of silliness that makes me think their relationship might have actually been good once. Without Springlock suits, Mike and Cassidy's pranks were harmless. However, between the dialogue, the dramatic voice acting, and samurai imagery, these cutscenes are played seriously in a way TCTHSY isn't. TCTHSY isn't framed as anything serious, despite the gruesome descriptions. BOV is framed as life or death, despite the lighthearted reality of the situation. The question isn't what these cutscenes are trying to tell us, it's why TOYSNHK is sharing them. TCTHSY paints someone intended to be William Afton as an innocent protagonist. Insidiousness gone completely unnoticed. BOV paints someone intended to be Mike Afton as a cruel antagonist. Childishness gone completely unnoticed. This is Mike's way of asking why he's the bad guy and William isn't. Why was Mike made to feel guilty for his brother's death all these years, while William got by as an innocent family man? In The Silver Eyes, William is described as being more outgoing than Henry. Afton was as robust and lively as Henry was withdrawn and shadowy from The Silver Eyes. One of the reasons William skirts blame in the novels is because of how he paints himself, the normal, charming businessman to Henry's spacey artist. No one suspected William, even though all the signs were there. Conversely, Mike was treated as a villain, the one in need of atoning, despite the fact he was just a kid messing around. And if we take those readings of BOV and TCTHSY, I can get a pretty good idea of why Mike would be showing Cassidy spring locking. It's because, for once, Mike isn't going to be the villain. He isn't going to take the blame for his father's actions. Instead, he's going to remind him of what William did. William killed Cassidy, not Mike. William is responsible for everything that happened, not Mike. Both he and William are starting to understand that. Part 12. Somehow, FNAF World returned. This section didn't exist when I was planning stuff out, but then I came to some realizations as I was looking into FNAF World. FNAF World wasn't supposed to be involved at all. I just wanted to find some solid evidence that the sprite in the OMC cutscene wasn't Golden Freddy. But things changed. This is an incredibly short section, but I think if I found some loose ends to tie up, I might as well share them. Earlier, I said that the drowning ending of FNAF World was TOYSNHK's happiest day. After all, the ending starts the same as the OMC cutscene in UCN, in which the player walks into OMC's lake. In UCN, the game crashes. TOYSNHK is trapped and angry, completely unable to move on. But once he understands that he doesn't need to do this, that he deserves his happiest day too, he can move on. When I first saw this image, I was pretty convinced it was 3 people watching TV. Someone taller, with their arms around 2 younger children. Mike let himself grow up and move on. William is the one that destroyed the Afton family. But without him, the Afton children could actually have a decent relationship. Part 13. Miscellaneous Voicelines. There are just a lot of voice lines I think are interesting, and I never really got the chance to fit them in my analysis, so you can feel free to skip them or listen. One of these voice lines is deleted, so I don't think it makes good evidence, but I think that deleted content is fine for literary analysis instead of, theorizing.
Shh. I've been looking for you. And now I will never let you go.
This almost seems to be a combination between Mike's "I'm going to come find you" and TOYSNHK's "I will never let you leave."
You won't die, but you'll wish you could.
This is a pretty direct reference to when Circus Baby says "you won't die" to Mike at the end of Sister Location. He is likely the only person to have heard this, although I can't say for sure.
A performance was demanded of me, and now I have delivered. Encore!
The use of passive voice here is interesting to me. Who demanded a performance? Did they demand it from Funtime Foxy or Mike? William did, after all, order Mike around a lot. And now Mike is delivering the consequences of William's actions.
A song was requested of me, and now I sing it.
This isn't much different from the previous line. Once again, Mike seems to point out that this is what William asked for. Mike is doing what William has always told him to do.
You knew I'd get you eventually.
This seems to be in reference to when Mike says, "I'm going to come find you," but it's honestly a little embarrassing that he's trying to make threats via Nightmare Balloon Boy. Also, Mike is probably the only one to have seen him, which is probably more relevant.
Might as well face the facts. You were always destined to fail.
One of many face puns that Withered Bonnie has, because he doesn't have a face. William is just facing the consequences of his actions. I think that's what's so interesting about Mike being TOYSNHK, to me at least. William created his own worst enemy, and he was doomed long before he realized that. Let me end this section off with that deleted voice line I mentioned earlier.
Have you begun to realize yet where you are yet, and who I am? Or are you still so delirious and confused that you still think you're a night guard? You'll understand. And even if you don't, it doesn't matter to me either way.
Like I said, I don't really consider this valid evidence for any theories. It's just an interesting line to me. If I had to guess why it was cut, it's probably to avoid confusion over who the night guard was. If you exclude Mr. Hippo, who's got his own thing going on, Pig Patch is the only mediocre melody without a TOYSNHK line. This doesn't seem to have that overlaid audio, but if I had to guess, it was probably meant to. It's just interesting to me that Mike doesn't mind that his father doesn't know who he is. William probably means so much more to Mike than Mike does to William. It's just something I wanted to look at. Conclusion. If you made it this far, I want to thank you. I really tried to lock in for this one, so it's a lot. I hope I convinced you or maybe gave you some new perspective, but I also don't mind if you disagree. I am more than used to people telling me they don't believe in the theories I'm saying, but I think it has so much more potential as a theory that goes very underexplored. This is my longest project, and I don't know if I'll ever do something like this again, but it was fun and kind of a lot of work. I fell down so many theory rabbit holes. I would love for you to bother me about what you think. I can talk about MikeTOYSNHK for a really, really long time if that wasn't super obvious. Thank you for watching for this long, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'm going to roll the credits with all of the video and audio sources that I used.